My family was a renowned puppet-making clan far and wide. The emperor once decreed, whoever inherits the position of the Yun family head shall become the crown princess. On the day of the family head competition, my father's adopted daughter secretly swapped the puppets we had crafted. The puppet she presented was exquisitely flawless, while mine looked shoddy and crudely made. The crown prince sneered at me for disgracing the family, and my father threatened to drive me out of the household. Little did they know, the puppet I made had been nourished with my blood and essence, and it had long since recognized me as its master. Moreover, they seemed to have forgotten the terrifying prophecy written in the family scroll, *, the 8th generation daughter, with the puppets she makes, shall slaughter the entire clan. *, I was that 8th generation daughter. In the Yun family, only men were allowed to learn the art of puppet making. But the male heirs of this generation were all mediocre in talent. The puppets they made were no different from those sold on the market. Because of this, my father was always wearing a frown, fearing that the family's craft would be lost to posterity. My elder sister saw all this. One day, she suddenly pulled me into her room. Inside her room stood a puppet. It had black hair and red lips, its face as fair as a peach blossom. When it looked at me, its eyes seemed to shimmer with life. As if it would speak the next moment, I gasped in astonishment, "Sister, did father make this new puppet? It's even more lifelike than ever." Yuan, I made this," my sister said, her eyes crinkling into a smile. "Now father won't have to worry about the craft dying out." Happily, she hugged the puppet and was about to go find father. I had wanted to go with her, but I couldn't resist the temptation of the newly made crispy candy in her room, so I stayed behind in her room to eat the candy. I thought she would be back soon, but to my surprise, my sister never returned from that trip. I went to father's courtyard to look for her, but the servants were guarding the gate, refusing to let anyone enter. I had no choice but to crawl through the dog hole hidden by weeds. Before I could get close, I heard loud arguments coming from inside the room. For 100 years, no one in the Yun family has ever made such a lifelike puppet. Could this be the very puppet mentioned in the family scroll's prophecy? Burn it at once." I quietly poked a hole in the window paper. Through the hole, I saw my uncles and cousins shouting at each other, their faces flushed with anger. In the center of the room stood the puppet my sister had made. My sister's hands and feet were bound, a piece of sackcloth stuffed in her mouth. She looked at father with pleading eyes, her face filled with sorrow. Father turned his head away. In front of everyone, he set my sister's puppet on fire with his own hands. But even after the puppet was burned to ashes, my uncles were still not satisfied. "Even if this puppet is burned, she can still make new ones in the future. Family head, to eliminate a problem, you must cut it off at the root. The prophecy says, the 8th generation daughter, with the puppets she makes, shall slaughter the entire clan, for the sake of the family. I say we kill her now to once and for all prevent any future disasters." It was the first time I had ever heard of this prophecy about the Yun family. I thought father would never agree to such a thing. After all, he had always loved my sister and me dearly. But after a moment of hesitation, father actually nodded his head in agreement. He looked at my sister, a flash of pain in his eyes, and said each word clearly and firmly, "Yunru, according to the prophecy. The 8th generation daughter should have been drowned as soon as she was born. I couldn't bear to take your life just because of a prophecy, so I let you grow up safely. But now that you have made such a lifelike puppet, for the sake of the entire clan, father has no choice but to sacrifice you." He picked up a long knife and walked toward my sister. I saw my sister shaking her head frantically, whether she was begging for mercy or promising never to make another puppet again. I could not tell, but father did not give her a chance to speak. Urged on by my uncles, he drove the long knife straight into my sister's heart. I could no longer contain myself. Just as I was about to break through the window, a voice shouted, "Stop!" From outside the door, my mother, who had always been gentle and obedient, ignored the servant's attempts to stop her and rushed into the room, throwing herself in front of my sister. Father hesitated. The tip of the knife was only an inch away from Mother's chest. With just a little more force, it would pierce through both Mother and my sister. Mother was gambling with the decades of love between her and Father for a chance to survive. Father's hand holding the knife did not move forward even a fraction of an inch. Mother let out a sigh of relief, but my uncles were enraged. Family head, the puppet made by the 8th generation daughter will slaughter our entire clan. You are also a member of the Yun family. Are you not afraid of dying at the hands of a puppet? They shouted and clamored, their voices filling the room. I saw Father's hand tremble slightly, then he gritted his teeth and pushed the knife forward with all his strength. The long knife pierced through Mother's heart and emerged from my sister's back. Blood splattered everywhere. Before she died, Mother noticed me hiding behind the hole in the window paper. She shook her head at me almost imperceptibly, so I dared not move. I covered my mouth tightly, letting my tears flow into my palms. Even after my sister's death, my uncles still refused to let go. They said there was another daughter in the 8th generation of the Yun family. Since one was dead, they might as well kill them all. Father flew into a rage. I have already killed my wife and my eldest daughter. Will you not even spare my youngest daughter? My uncles surrounded him, staring at him silently. After a long while, Father's shoulders slumped like a deflated balloon. In the end, he nodded his head. The mansion cannot afford to have people dying one after another. Once this tempest blows over, I will deal with Yuan to ensure the safety of the entire clan. I wept uncontrollably, my whole body shaking with fear. That evening, news spread throughout the mansion that my sister had accidentally fallen into a well, and Mother had jumped in to save her, only to fall in herself. Both of them had drowned. White mourning drapes were hung all over the mansion. My uncles wore sad expressions, sighing repeatedly and saying that the two of them had been unlucky. Father's eyes were filled with tears as he told me to kowtow to Mother and my sister. I trembled violently, wondering when Father would send me to join them in death. That year, I was only 6 years old. Every night, I had the same nightmare, my uncles surrounding me, Father holding a long knife with Mother and my sister's blood still on its tip. He would swing the knife at me calmly, saying, Yuan, it's only because you are the 8th generation daughter. For the sake of the entire clan, you must die. I could not sleep soundly, always feeling that my day of death was drawing near. But less than half a month later, a turning point came. The emperor in the palace also had a dream. He dreamed that he was falling off a cliff, when a woman appeared with a puppet and saved him. Under the woman's command, the puppet transformed into a white feathered phoenix, carrying him back to the imperial palace. He asked the woman her name, but she only smiled and said that she was the head of the Yun family. After waking up, the emperor ordered his men to inquire about the Yun family. Upon hearing that the Yun family had never had a female head before, he sighed deeply. Then he announced, "If the next head of the Yun family is a woman, I shall make her the crown princess." With these words, the blade hanging over my head was finally withdrawn. Father began to teach me the art of puppet making with great care. My uncles took in many concubines, each of them eager to give birth to a daughter. They seemed to have forgotten the prophecy in the family scroll, scrambling to become the crown prince's father-in-law. But none of them could have a daughter in this generation. I was the only girl left. They pinned all their hopes on me, eagerly waiting for me to become the family head and make the Yun family a relative of the imperial family. But I was mediocre in talent, unable to master Father's craft. Father would always sigh when he looked at me, saying that I was not as good as my sister, and that if my sister were still alive, she would surely become the crown princess. Before long, Father married again. My stepmother was a widow who brought a daughter with her into the mansion. Her daughter was adopted into Father's name, entered into the family genealogy, and renamed Yunayu. My stepmother looked quite similar to my birth mother, but her fingers were slender and delicate, never having done a day of rough work. She was much younger than mother. Father was completely infatuated with my stepmother, and he doted on Yun as well. He taught Yun how to make puppets with his own hands. And he took her with him every time he went to perform for the noble families in the capital. He said that Yun was extremely talented and might even become the first female head of the Yun family. Everyone in the mansion began to fawn over Yun, and no one had any time left to spare for me. Thus, no one knew that on the day I came of age, I suddenly had an epiphany and mastered the art of puppet making. The puppets I made were even more lifelike than the one my sister had made back then. I never said a word about it, only waiting eagerly for the family head competition to begin, so that I could finally escape the Yun family. 6 years later, the time for the family head succession arrived, and the competition finally began, because of the emperor's promise. This competition was exceptionally grand. Even the crown prince came to watch. After my male cousins presented the puppets they had made, the crown prince laughed mockingly. So this is the best that the Yun family's descendants can do. They are nothing special at all. But when Yun walked onto the stage with her puppet, the entire audience fell silent. The puppet standing in front of her had hair cut like a knife's edge, eyebrows as dark as ink, and eyes as bright as autumn waves. When it looked at people, it seemed to have 1,000 words on its lips. Its bearing was elegant and its features were as beautiful as jade. Yun held the puppet's strings and manipulated it. The puppet moved as smoothly as flowing water, drawing gasps of amazement from the entire audience. Only I stared fixedly at the puppet standing beside her. This puppet was the one I had spent 6 years making specifically for the competition. Every day, I nourished it with my blood and essence, allowing it to understand human nature. Yun noticed my gaze and looked at me with a half-smile. "Sister, where is the puppet you made? Let me take a look at it quickly." A maid brought up my entry for the competition. The puppet standing in front of me was shoddy and crudely made, no different from the toys that could be bought for a few copper coins in the market. The crown prince let out a loud snort of laughter. "What is this thing? It doesn't even have proper eyes. It's just here to make up the numbers, isn't it?" I knew instantly what had happened. Yun had swapped our competition puppets, amidst the crown prince's jeers. I shook my head. "This is not my puppet, that one is," I said, pointing to the puppet standing beside Yun. As soon as the words left my mouth, Yun frowned. "Sister, I know you are very competitive, but this puppet was clearly made by me after days and nights of hard work. How can you tell such a blatant lie?" Then she looked at the crown prince, her eyes shimmering with tears, filled with nothing but grievance. The crown prince slammed his hand on the table and shouted angrily, "Everyone in the capital knows that Miss Yun is highly skilled in puppet making. As for you, an unknown woman hidden away in the inner chambers, how could you possibly make such a lifelike puppet?" In the past, Father had taken Yun to perform at the Eastern Palace several times. I had long heard rumors that she and the crown prince had developed a secret affection for each other. Now, seeing this scene, I knew the rumors were true. I remained calm and turned to ask Yun, "Since you claim that the puppet was made by you, then tell me, how tall is it? What is the length of its arms?" Yun fell silent for a moment. "It's 8 feet tall." "The arm length?" She hesitated, unable to answer right away. I told her clearly, "It's 8 feet 3 inches tall, with arms 4 feet 1 inch long." Before she could respond, I rolled up my sleeve, revealing dozens of scars of varying depths on my wrist to everyone present, to make the puppet lifelike. I nourished it with my blood and essence every single day. My hands are covered in scars because of it. "What about you?" I turned to ask Yun, "Do you have any scars on your hands?" She froze on the spot. Whispers broke out among the crowd below. "Furthermore, sister, you've been busy running around visiting various mansions every day. Tell me, when did you have the time to make this puppet?" Can you even explain how it was crafted? I asked her softly. Yuna's eyes turned red with grievance, tears pooling in them. Instead of answering my questions, she looked at the crown prince, her expression full of unspoken sorrow. The crown prince's face darkened, his gaze toward me filled with disgust. A person should know how to respect themselves. Losing is not a shame, but lying and turning black into white is simply shameless. Master Yun, is this how you raise your biological daughter? She'll stop at nothing just to marry me. Do you intend to favor your own flesh and blood over your adopted daughter? It would have been so easy to verify the truth, yet not a single person suggested it. My father didn't seem to care about the truth at all, only about what the crown prince thought. Since the crown prince was clearly siding with Yuan, he followed his lead, making a final judgment. Yuan. Is it because you knew your puppet was too shoddy to be presented, too afraid of being laughed at, that you tried to claim our US puppet as your own? How could I have raised such a shameless girl? You've disgraced our entire family. I looked at him calmly. I'm not lying, it was sister who swapped our puppets. Seeing the crown prince's brows furrow even deeper in anger, my father quickly snapped at me. Yuan, how dare you not admit your mistake? If you continue to be so stubborn, I will disown you and drive you out of the Yun family today. But what mistake had I made? I stared back at him stubbornly, thinking of my mother and sister's tragic deaths 14 years ago. My voice rang out clearly. I'm not wrong. My father cursed me for being obstinate, amidst Yu's sobs. Under the crown prince's pressure, and in front of all the members of the Yun family, he truly disowned me and drove me out of the house, even though the puppet was clearly made by me. He accused me of being a thief. Before the main gate slammed shut behind me, I grabbed the hem of my father's robe. Father, from now on, I'm no longer a member of the Yun family, am I? That's right. Your name will be struck from the family genealogy forever. Busy currying favor with the crown prince, my father roughly pulled his robe free from my grasp, not even leaving me with a single extra piece of clothing, let alone a single copper coin. As dusk fell, a heavy snow began to fall. The Yun mansion was bustling with activity. While I walked through the wind and snow to the corner of the street, the servants pointed at me and whispered among themselves. Some said I deserved what I got, others pitied me for my misfortune. No one noticed the lightness of my steps as I left the Yun family, or the faint smile on my lips. I sat cross-legged in the snow, leaning my back against the wall of the alley, waiting for someone. I didn't know how long I waited. By the time the sky turned completely dark, he finally arrived. He stood in front of me 8 feet 3 inches tall, his fingers cold as ice. He knelt down and lifted my chin with his hand. You deliberately let her swap me out, let yourself be humiliated at the competition, and didn't even let me speak up to defend you. Do you have any idea how miserable that made me feel? Yes, I had deliberately let Yuan see the puppet I made, and then allowed her to swap it with hers. I know, he said, smiling at me, his eyes filled with tender affection, his features as handsome as spring blossoms. Frankly, I never wanted to see you win the competition and marry the crown prince anyway. As he spoke, he gently stroked my cheek with his icy hand, his touch brimming with undisguised tenderness and affection. The puppet I had nourished with my blood and essence for 6 years had come to find me. He leaned in close to my ear, his voice soft and gentle, his breath as sweet as orchids. Master, do you want to slaughter the entire clan? I'll help you. I pulled his hand away from my face and used it to help myself stand up. Slaughter the clan? Do you really think you're human? Even though you've gained self-awareness and can move on your own, you're still just a puppet. Puppets can't harm humans otherwise. You'll be struck down by lightning and die. I crossed my arms over my chest and looked at him. Xiao Shuangjiang, have you grown tired of living? Of course not, he said, taking off his thick fur cloak and carefully draping it over my shoulders. His smile was warm and gentle. What would you like to eat? I'll take you anywhere you want. Xiao Shuangjiang had brought all the silver I had saved over the years with him. The Yun family didn't care whether I lived or died, in this bitter cold. Without any money, I would either starve to death, freeze to death, or be captured and sold to a brothel. Luckily, I had always kept a way out for myself. Xiao Shuangjiang took me to Chunfeng Tower for dinner, then escorted me back to the inn. This was the first night I had ever spent away from the Yun mansion. Only at this moment did I truly feel that I no longer belonged to that family of heartless monsters. The cold wind seeped through the window lattice, cutting into my skin like 1,000 tiny knives. I curled up on the bed, suddenly shivering violently. Xiao Shuangjiang carried a bucket of hot water into the room. He knelt down beside the bed, took my ankles in his hands, and carefully removed my shoes and socks. "Why are your hands and feet always so cold?" He knelt on one knee, soaking my feet in the hot water, then rolled up my trousers and gently wiped my calves with a damp cloth. "I don't know," I said, resting my chin in my hand and letting out a soft sigh. "I've been feeling more and more sensitive to the cold these past few years." After I finished washing up and lay down on the bed fully clothed, Xiao Shuangjiang still didn't leave. "You must have placed me somewhere prominent by now," I said. "She can't make such an exquisite puppet herself, so she must treasure me very much. But if she can't find me later, and somehow discovers that I can move and act on my own, that would be a big problem." Xiao Shuangjiang leaned against the window, ignoring my words. Instead, he asked, "The quilts in this inn are thin. Are you cold, master?" Without waiting for my answer, he took off his outer robe, leaving only his inner garment, and climbed onto the bed beside me. He wrapped his arms around me through the quilt, holding me gently. "I'll keep you warm, Xiao Shuangjiang. Don't you know that men and women shouldn't be too intimate with each other?" He let out a low chuckle, tightening his embrace around me. "But I'm just a puppet. I don't have to abide by those silly human rules." He pressed his face against the quilt, his voice muffled. "I really don't want to leave you. If it weren't for the fact that I need to go back to gather information for you, I'd never leave your side. Master, have you figured out what you're going to do next?" "I have," I said, looking into his bright, clear eyes. "Xiao Shuangjiang, before we do anything else, I need to let myself die." 2 days later, I appeared at the gate of the Yun mansion. My clothes were tattered, my hair was messy and unkempt, and I huddled in a ball, begging the servants to let me in. I was trembling so violently that I could barely speak. The servants didn't dare to make a decision on their own, so they hurried inside to report to my father. I couldn't stand up, so I knelt half in the snow. After a long while, my third uncle emerged from the mansion. "You've already been disowned and struck from the family genealogy. What are you doing here?" He was wrapped in a thick padded coat, looking at me coldly. "Uncle, I'm so cold, so hungry. Please give me just one bowl of rice," I said, struggling to lift my head, trying to grab the hem of his robe. Third uncle quickly stepped back, as if afraid I would dirty his expensive clothes. Third aunt heard the commotion outside and rushed over to see what was happening. "Isn't this Yuan? Why are you in such a sorry state?" she said, pretending to take off her cloak to wrap it around me. "You're freezing cold. If we don't get you inside, you'll die. We should take her in at once." But third uncle stopped her. "She's no longer a member of the Yun family. She has nothing to do with us anymore. Let her live or die, we don't care." Third aunt's eyes turned red with pity. She protested, but I watched her grow up. How can I bear to let her die out here in the cold? As they argued, my father finally came out of the mansion, looking at me pale-faced. On the verge of passing out, he pressed his lips together and exchanged a glance with third uncle. Then third uncle pulled him aside, and the two of them began whispering in hushed tones. I had had exceptionally good hearing since I was a child. I could hear every word of their conversation clearly. "Are you going to save her, family head? No matter what, she's still the 8th generation daughter. Even though she's been disowned, I can't help but feel uneasy about her. You mean we should just leave her there to die in the street? Third uncle nodded vigorously. Exactly. Yun Yuan has lost the crown prince's favor. She's completely useless to us now. Besides, your new wife is pregnant. You're going to be a father again soon. Sacrificing one daughter to ensure the safety of the entire family is a very good deal, isn't it? That was when I found out that my stepmother was pregnant again. My father raised his eyebrows and laughed aloud. I was able to sacrifice Ruer back then. Naturally, I can sacrifice her now too. So they had never forgotten the prophecy after all. They had only spared my life temporarily because of the enormous temptation of making me the crown princess. Now that I had no chance of marrying the crown prince, the blade was once again hanging over my neck. My father only glanced at me once, then turned on his heel and walked back into the mansion, ordering the servants to close the gate tightly and not to let me in under any circumstances. Third aunt was dragged back inside by third uncle. The cloak she had left draped over my shoulders was also snatched away by him. I curled up in front of the Yun mansion gate. Closing my eyes and leaning against the wall, every half an hour, a servant would come out to check if I was still breathing. By the time thick snow covered my hair and eyelashes, the servant's hand trembled in shock. She's not breathing. She's dead. He rushed inside to report to my father. A moment later, he ran back out and said to another servant, the family head said that people who freeze to death have extremely strong grudges. Besides, she's no longer a member of the Yun family. We don't need to bother burying her. The patrol guards will come by later and drag her body to the mass grave. The two servants walked away, their voices fading into the distance as they whispered to each other. The family head is truly ruthless. Yeah, she was his daughter for over 10 years after all. Dusk fell once more, and the moon hung high in the sky, its pale light as cold as snow, spilling over the bluestone alley. Just as my body was completely frozen stiff, someone walked over to me and let out a soft sigh. Why do you always insist on making yourself suffer like this? Xiao Shuangjiang picked me up in his arms and walked through the empty alley, leading me straight back to the inn with familiar ease. He closed all the doors and windows tightly, carried me to the bed, and covered me with a thick quilt. Xiao Shuangjiang, my feet are so cold, I whispered. He moved to the foot of the bed, took my feet in his hands, and lowered his head to gently massage the acupoints. Why did you want them to think you were dead? I shivered as I answered him. Only when everyone believes that the second young lady of the Yun family is dead can I reappear before the world with a new identity. I didn't want Xiao Shuangjiang to slaughter the clan for me as a puppet. If the Yun family was going to be destroyed, I would be the one to do it myself. But with the crown prince's protection over them now, I needed an identity noble enough to stand against him. Xiao Shuangjiang kneaded my calf muscles slowly, his fingers steady. I've looked into the matter you asked me to. Former empress loved puppet shows. She used to invite the Yun family to perform in the palace often. Her young daughter, the little princess, grew fond of puppets too. She even learned to carve wood into dolls herself. The head of the Yun family praised her for her exceptional talent and gave her a puppet toy, which the princess cherished dearly. I knew exactly what kind of puppet my father had given the little princess. Back then, he had made 3 identical puppet toys, 2 stayed in the mansion, and 1 was sent to the palace. It was a little doll in a red dress with long braids, one that had sat on my bedside for years, 17 years ago, during the Mulan spring hunt. The former empress took the 4-year-old princess to the hunting grounds. They were ambushed halfway. The former empress escaped unharmed, but the princess vanished without a trace. The royal family searched for years, yet she was never found. Rumor has it that the princess was clutching that little puppet in her arms when she went missing. I said, guiding Xiao Shuangjiang's hand higher. My knee hollow is frozen stiff. Then I instructed him, after you enter the palace with Yun Yu, find a portrait of the former empress, copy it, and bring it to me. Also, try to find out if the princess had any birthmarks on her body. Xiao Shuangjiang didn't ask what I planned to do with the information, he just looked at me with a smile. Will there be a reward for me? What reward do you want? Should I nourish you with more of my blood and essence? No, he said softly. I can't bear to see you hurt again. He squeezed my calf gently, then leaned forward slowly. His stunningly handsome face suddenly filling my vision. Will you let me get under the covers tonight? Puppets don't feel the cold, but I hate being separated from you by this thick quilt. I didn't answer, just looked up at him lazily. Xiao Shuangjiang pressed his lips together, a hint of pleading in his eyes. Is master afraid of me? But I'm just a puppet, not a real man. I would never do anything to hurt you. When I still didn't respond, he curved his lips into a bright smile. I'll take that as a yes. Then, that night, Xiao Shuangjiang's cold, lifeless hand pressed tightly against my lower back through the thin fabric of my inner garment, and that was all he did, just held me there, never daring to cross any boundaries. The frost and snow melted away, and spring breezes woke the peach and plum blossoms. Before I knew it, Yun Yu's wedding day arrived. The Yun family spared no expense for this prestigious marriage. Dozens of trunks filled with dowry were prepared. And Yun Yu was escorted to the Eastern Palace in a grand procession, her wedding procession stretching for miles, dyed crimson with celebration. Xiao Shuangjiang entered the palace with her. I had found an abandoned cabin deep in the bamboo forest on the outskirts of the capital, where I made my temporary home. A few days later, Xiao Shuangjiang returned with a scroll for me. When I first saw that portrait, I froze for a long time. I thought I must have been seeing things, he said. Take a look for yourself. I'm sure you'll be just as shocked. I unrolled the scroll. Staring back at me was a woman wearing a flower crown atop her head. She had an oval face, willow leaf eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes, and a delicate nose. Her expression was soft and gentle, radiating kindness. I froze where I stood, unable to speak for a long while. Xiao Shuangjiang walked over to my side. You think she looks like her too, don't you? The woman in the portrait bore an uncanny resemblance, 70 to 80% to my mother. She even looked 50% like my stepmother. My voice came out hoarse as I asked Xiao Shuangjiang, is this copy identical to the original portrait? You taught me how to paint with your own hands. He scoffed lightly. Do you really think I would make a mistake? A sudden thought struck me, how often my father had entered the palace all those years ago to perform puppet shows for the former empress. A wild guess began to form in my mind. I took out a sheet of rice paper and spread it flat on the table. Draw me a portrait of the emperor. I need to see what he looks like. Xiao Shuangjiang quickly sketched the emperor's likeness for me. I stared at the two portraits side by side, lost in thought for a long time. Imagining what their child would have looked like, a nose a little straighter than mine, thinner eyebrows, a slightly narrower face shape. Carving puppets meant learning the art of fine detailing after shaping the wood. Holding a flat chisel, you drew the outline, defined the facial features, and carved the puppet's basic bone structure. Then you added colors and makeup to bring the puppet's face to life. Changing faces and altering appearances was child's play to me. Xiao Shuangjiang leaned in closer, his fingers brushing my cheek as he gazed into my eyes. Does master plan to change her face? I need a new face, a face that will serve my purposes well. Before I picked up the carving knife to work on my transformation, Xiao Shuangjiang cupped my face in his hands, studying me intently, a hint of longing and reluctance in his eyes. No matter what you look like, I will always love you, he said softly. But I want to memorize your face, the way you are right now, forever. I sat in front of a bronze mirror, alternating between a knife and a brush, carefully altering my features. Spring arrived in full bloom. The emperor led his ministers on the annual Mulan spring hunt. On their way back to the palace, their procession passed through a bamboo forest. The emperor, overcome with a sudden wave of sentimentality, lifted the curtain of his carriage to gaze outside, through the dense bamboo stalks. He spotted a fierce-looking tiger crouching in the undergrowth, ready to pounce. Even from a distance, its outline was unmistakably that of a tiger, but upon closer inspection, he noticed a leopard standing opposite the tiger. The tiger and the leopard lunged at each other, claws slashing, and bamboo leaves fell all around them, covering the ground in a thick layer. The emperor quickly ordered his guards to hunt them down. The guards narked their arrows and drew their bows. The arrows flew straight and true, hitting both the tiger and the leopard square in their bodies, yet neither of them reacted in the slightest. Not a single drop of blood was shed. They continued to fight as if nothing had happened. Finally, one of the guards realized something was wrong. Why aren't they making any noise? Shouldn't a tiger roar in pain when struck by an arrow? On the emperor's orders, a guard cautiously approached the two animals. When he got close enough to see the tiger's eyes clearly, he froze in shock. "They're fake. They're puppets," he shouted. The crowd around him gasped in astonishment. Just then, I stepped out from the bamboo forest, stopping my manipulation of the puppet strings. I frowned and demanded, "Who are you people? Why did you shoot arrows at my puppets?" In the blink of an eye, two imperial guards rushed forward, grabbed me by the arms, and dragged me before the emperor's carriage. The guard explained what had happened, pointing at me accusingly. "Your Majesty, this woman was performing puppet shows in the forest and disturbed your royal procession." The two puppets, the tiger and the leopard, were also brought before the emperor. The emperor glanced at them, and his eyes lit up with sudden interest. "These tiger and leopard puppets are incredibly lifelike. They seem even more realistic than those made by the Yun family. Are you a member of the Yun family?" the emperor asked, looking at me directly. I lowered my head in panic, shaking it vigorously, my body trembling with feigned fear. "No, I just love making puppets. I make them for fun." "Why are you trembling so much?" the emperor asked, his voice gentle. "Do you think I'm going to eat you? Lift your head and look at me." A cool mountain breeze brushed against my cheeks. At my feet, fresh bamboo shoots were pushing their way up through the soil. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly raised my head, my eyes meeting the emperor's. The eunuch serving the emperor stiffened, his eyes widening in shock. The emperor froze for a second, then pressed his lips together, his voice thick with emotion as he asked, "How old are you?" I'm not sure," I said, my knees buckling as I fell to the ground in a clumsy kowtow. "Please forgive me, Your Majesty. If I had known your royal procession would pass through here, I would never have dared to disturb you." But the emperor paid no heed to my apology. He pressed on, his voice urgent. "Not sure? Why don't you know how old you are?" "I was adopted by my foster father," I explained, my voice trembling with false timidity. "He said he found me when I was just a baby, around 4 or 5 years old. 17 years have passed since then, so I suppose I must be around 21 now." The emperor's hand trembled slightly, his thumb rubbing nervously against the fabric of his sleeve. "Where is your foster father now?" "He's dead," I replied simply. The emperor fell silent for a moment, then asked where I lived, insisting on visiting the dilapidated little cabin in the bamboo forest. He wandered around the cabin, his eyes scanning every corner, until his gaze finally fell on the little puppet doll sitting on the bedside. It was the doll in the red dress with 2 long braids, smiling up at him with its round, cherubic face. He exchanged a meaningful glance with the eunuch beside him, then turned back to me, his voice sharp with urgency. "Where did you get this puppet doll?" "My foster father said he found it in my arms when he picked me up," I lied smoothly. It was the same puppet doll that Xiao Shuangjiang had secretly retrieved from the Yun mansion for me, the exact same one that the little princess had carried with her when she went missing. The emperor pressed his lips together, his eyes shining with a bright, hopeful light. "Have you always lived here?" I shook my head. "When I was little, we lived on a mountain southwest of the capital. My foster father always hid away in the mountains, never interacting with outsiders. He adopted me because he wanted someone to take care of him in his old age and bury him when he died. It wasn't until his deathbed that he told me the truth. He said he found me near this bamboo forest and told me to come back here to live. He said I might have a chance of meeting my biological parents. The emperor struggled to contain his excitement, but he was still cautious. He waved 2 palace maids over and whispered a few instructions to them. By this time, the Crown Prince and Prince Rui had also arrived at the scene. After listening to the eunuch's explanation of what had happened, the Crown Prince's face twisted with disdain. "Father, although this woman bears a resemblance to you, there are thousands of people in the world who look alike. How could a mere country orphan possibly be?" He never got to finish his sentence. Prince Rui cut him off sharply. "It's not just her face that matches," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "The time and place of her disappearance also align perfectly with the princess's. Why are you in such a hurry to dismiss her, Crown Prince? Why not let the 2 maids verify her identity first?" The emperor looked at me gently. "Do as the maids say, let them verify your identity first." I dared not disobey the emperor's order. I followed the 2 maids to a nearby carriage. Trembling with feigned confusion and fear as they helped me remove my clothes and examined my body carefully, half an incense stick's time later, the head maid helped me dress again, then stepped down from the carriage and knelt before the emperor. "Your Majesty," she reported, her voice trembling with excitement. After examining the young lady's body thoroughly, I found only one mark on her, a plum blossom-shaped birthmark on her lower back. The emperor stared at me in stunned silence. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he finally let his emotions overflow, his voice cracking with joy. "It's my hua-hua, it's my hua-hua, come back to me at last." Xiao Hua-hua was the private name of the little princess born to the former empress. After we met at the hunting grounds, I was taken into the palace by the emperor. Seeing my face, which bore such a striking resemblance to the late empress, he was convinced that I was his long-lost daughter. I became Xiao Hua, Princess Chowning. The emperor had few heirs, only 2 sons. Now that he suddenly had a daughter, he doted on me relentlessly, showering my palace with all manner of rare treasures. "Hua Hua, whatever you desire, tell me, I will get it for you," he said. I always thanked him with humility and gentleness, never asking for anything. The more I acted this way, the more the emperor felt he owed me a debt. When the emperor asked me again what I wanted, I pretended to think for a moment before replying. "Daughter loves puppets. I have heard that the Yun family is renowned for their puppet shows. Could you invite them to perform for me in the palace?" "That is easily done." The emperor agreed without hesitation. "You loved watching Yun Hachen's puppet shows when you were a child. I will summon him to the palace tomorrow. Whenever you wish to watch a performance in the future, you may send for him at any time." Yun Hachen, that was my father. The next day, I sat upright on the platform, dressed in magnificent imperial robes, my eyes lowering to gaze at Yun Hachen as he knelt to kowtow before me. He knelt in a posture of utmost humility and respect. Unfortunately, he was standing too far away to see my face clearly. I slowly raised my hand. "Begin the performance." He froze for a brief moment, as if my voice sounded familiar to him, but it was only a momentary hesitation. He dared not say anything more, only picked up the puppet strings and began the show. I clapped in perfect cooperation, then asked him with a smile, "This princess is not yet satisfied. Do you have more shows to perform?" I knew that in recent years, he had been afflicted with gout and could not perform puppet shows for long periods of time, so he had made a rule for himself, only 1 show per day. 1 show earned him 5 ingots of silver, plus rewards from the audience. He never had to worry about making a living, but in front of me, he could not refuse. "Yes, Your Highness." He performed another new show, but I still watched him with unflagging interest, asking again, "Do you have more?" Yun Hachen's hand paused. He pressed his lips together and replied, "Yes, I made him perform continuously for 4 hours. Yoon Haechan was soaked in sweat, his arms trembling with the effort of lifting them. When I asked him yet again, "Do you have more?" he finally gave me a different answer. "This commoner lacks talent and learning. I have no more shows to perform for your highness." He said, "Oh, is that so?" I sighed, pretending to be disappointed. "But I am still not satisfied. Why don't you perform all the shows again from the beginning?" In the end, Yoon Haechan was almost carried out of the palace by his servants, fleeing as if granted amnesty. "Oh, wait a moment," I called out softly, stopping him. His body stiffened. He turned to look at me in a daze. "Does your highness have any further commands? I enjoyed your puppet shows very much. Continue tomorrow," I said. Yoon Haechan fell silent for a moment, glancing at his sore, useless hands. "Yes, your highness," he agreed with his mouth, but I knew he would go to seek help. Sure enough, the next day, the people who came to my palace were not Yoon Haechan, but the Crown Prince and Yoon Ah-yu. Yoon Ah-yu had been ill a few days earlier. This was the first time she had seen me. When she laid eyes on me, she looked stunned. "Your highness, you look so familiar." I looked at her with a smile. "Do I?" When she heard my voice, her expression froze completely. She stared at me carefully for a long moment before finally managing to compose herself. "Yesterday, your highness made my father perform puppet shows for 7 hours straight without even letting him drink a sip of water. My father's arms are so sore he cannot lift them. He is unable to enter the palace to perform today. He specially sent me to ask for leave on his behalf," she said. The Crown Prince, thinking that I was a country bumpkin who, despite the emperor's favor, was still uncouth and unrefined, looked at me with disdain. "Xiao Hua, do you not know how to behave properly? How could you make my father-in-law perform for 7 hours straight?" he snapped. I lowered my head, looking at the Crown Prince with a face full of apology. "I am truly sorry. The puppet shows were so wonderful. I loved them so much that I forgot my manners. How about this? When Master Yoon has recovered his strength, I will invite him and his wife to the palace and reward them generously," I said. I was a person of my word. I always kept my promises. A few days later, I summoned Yoon Haechan and his wife to the palace. I bestowed upon them a pile of jewels, saying apologetically, "It was this princess's fault the other day. I injured your hands. Your highness honors this commoner too much," Yoon Haechan said, accepting the jewels obediently. I then presented them with a bowl of soup each. "This is tonic soup that my father prepared to strengthen my health. The imperial kitchen made extra today, so I wish to bestow it upon you," I said, in front of my eyes. They drank every last drop of the soup in their bowls. That night, the pregnant Lady Yoon returned to the mansion and was seized with violent abdominal pain. Soon after, she began bleeding profusely from below. When Yoon Ah-yu heard the news, she immediately sent imperial physicians to the Yoon mansion to examine her mother. By the time the physicians arrived, Lady Yoon had already miscarried. When Yoon Haechan saw the son he had longed for so much lying dead in a pool of blood, he was overcome with grief. The man who had remained steadfast when my sister and I died was now covered in tears. The imperial physicians declared that Lady Yoon's miscarriage had been caused by drinking an abortifacient. After thinking carefully, Yoon Haechan concluded that his wife's food and drink that day had been no different from usual. The only difference was the tonic soup she had drunk in the palace, which I had bestowed upon her. Upon hearing this, Yoon Ah-yu rushed into my palace like a madwoman. "Xiao Hua, my family has never done you any harm. Why did you frame my father and harm my mother?" she screamed. I looked at her with the wide-eyed innocence of a frightened fawn. "What is the crown princess talking about?" I asked. "Stop pretending," Yoon Ah-yu shrieked. "My mother was 6 months pregnant. You made her drink an abortifacient. She almost died along with the child. Do you know that? My mother is already advanced in years. Because of this miscarriage, her health has been completely ruined," she cried. Somehow, when I heard her say this, a surge of pleasure welled up in my heart. I would never forget how my stepmother had mistreated me after she entered the mansion. The padded jacket she had made for me when I was 10 years old, I had to wear it until I was 15, during the winter months. A section of my wrists and ankles was always exposed to the cold. My stepmother had said that there was no need to waste too much money on a girl, so she made me wear ragged clothes and starve. When I had a high fever and was trembling all over, she refused to call a doctor, watching coldly as I fell into a coma. If Xiao Shuangjiang had not gone to the medicine shop to buy medicine for me, I would not have lived to see today, but unfortunately, I could not show any hint of my joy at this moment. I could only put on a look of sorrow and grief. The soup I gave her was nothing but tonic soup to strengthen her health. How could it possibly be an abortifacient? I asked. The Crown Prince doted on Yun Yu. Emboldened by his support, Yun Yu clung to her accusations, refusing to let go. When the Crown Prince heard what had happened, he hurried over, his face dark with anger. I will make father see what a venomous, heartless creature his beloved daughter really is, he said coldly. He reported the matter to the emperor, but the emperor refused to believe it. How could Hua possibly do such a thing? He said. First, she made Yun Hachan perform puppet shows for 7 hours straight, nearly crippling his hands. Then she made Liu drink an abortifacient. Her heart is truly vicious. The Crown Prince accused me to the emperor. As for the first incident, it was only because Hua is innocent and simple-hearted. She loved watching the puppet shows so much that she did not think about the consequences, the emperor said, pausing for a moment before adding, as for the second incident, then we shall investigate. Once we have found out the truth, we can clear Hua's name. Yun Yu glared at me coldly. When we find out the truth, we will see how you can wriggle out of this, she sneered. But after a full day of investigation, interrogating palace servants, searching for the medicine bowls, they could find no evidence whatsoever against me. After all, the palace kitchen really had made extra tonic soup that day, and the abortifacient had been bought by Xiao Shuangjiang. He had also disposed of all the medicine dregs and bowls, leaving me with nothing to worry about. Since the investigation could not implicate me, the emperor instead felt that I had been wrongfully accused despite my kind intentions in bestowing the soup. He doted on me even more, and his attitude toward the Crown Prince and his wife turned cold. He frowned and asked the Crown Prince, "How can you not even trust your own sister?" "Indeed," Prince Rui said. Walking into the palace just at that moment, he sighed and added, "Sister has suffered a great injustice. As her second brother, my heart aches for her." He had bought many new and interesting trinkets from the market and had them sent to my palace. This was the 6th time Prince Rui had sent gifts to my palace. This time, I accepted the gifts and looked at Prince Rui, who had lingered behind instead of leaving. "Does second brother have any other business?" I asked. Prince Rui looked at me deeply, waved the palace servants away, and closed the palace doors. "The Crown Prince's actions today, they must have chilled your heart. Sister, even I, as your second brother, feel wronged on your behalf," he said. He was currying favor with me. I looked at him with a smile. "If second brother has something to say, he may speak plainly," I replied. Prince Rui pressed his lips together. "Has sister ever thought, if he treats you like this now, what will happen to you when he ascends the throne in the future?" he asked. I continued to smile, saying nothing. "Or has sister ever thought, perhaps," he said, raising his eyebrows slightly, his eyes darkening with ambition, "he is not the only one who can ascend the throne." The Crown Prince was the son of the emperor's favorite noble consort and, coincidentally, the eldest son, although he was mediocre in both literary talent and martial prowess. He had still been named Crown Prince. Prince Rui, on the other hand, was the son of a palace maid, but he had been intelligent since childhood, and his talent far surpassed that of the Crown Prince. In his position, it was impossible not to harbor ambitions for the throne. Prince Rui had the heart to contend for the crown. I picked up a jujube and popped it into my mouth. I understand perfectly well what second brother means, I said, if sister is willing to lend me her help. In the future you will become the eldest princess, he promised, staring into my eyes. Whether I become eldest princess or not, it does not matter, I said, resting my chin in my hand and smiling at Prince Rui. What matters is, how can second brother make me believe that you have the ability to seize that throne? What if I back the wrong horse? Would I not be doomed forever? I asked. Prince Rui lowered his voice and placed a hand on my shoulder. Sister is truly a woman of deep thought. He said, tell me, what do you want second brother to do? 2 things, I replied. First, force the third master of the Yun family to divorce his wife, then cut off his head and bring it to me. When Prince Rui heard this, he let out a laugh. Sister seems to hate the Yun family quite a lot, he observed. Second, kill the first master of the Yun family, leave his body intact, and place it in his chamber. I added, if second brother can accomplish these 2 things, then from now on, I will be at your command, I promised. After Prince Rui left, Xiao Shuangjiang stepped out from behind the screen. He frowned in disgust and wiped my shoulder with a handkerchief. He sat down on the couch, lifted me onto his lap, and sniffed my shoulder repeatedly, his expression filled with obvious displeasure. He dirtied this place, he muttered. Then, suddenly, he lowered his head and bit down on my shoulder. The pain made me gasp, and I raised my hand to hit his chest. Xiao Shuangjiang caught my wrist with one hand, resting his chin on my shoulder. This place needs to smell like me, he said. Prince Rui was a man of decisive action. It wasn't long before word spread that my third uncle had become infatuated with a courtesan from a local brothel, utterly besotted by her charms. No one knew exactly how she had bewitched him, but he was not only determined to redeem her from the brothel, he even wanted to take her as his legal wife. The Yun family, regarding this as a stain on their noble reputation, naturally refused to consent. Undeterred, third uncle kicked up a fuss every single day, relentless in his pursuit. For the sake of that courtesan, he formally proposed to divorce my third aunt. At first, third aunt had refused to agree, but seeing how absurdly obsessed he had become, her heart finally turned to stone. She took the divorce papers and returned to her natal home without a second glance. The very next day, third uncle vanished without a trace, never to return home again. The Yun family assumed he had spent the night at the brothel and sent servants to fetch him. To their confusion, his paramour insisted that he had not been there at all. Amidst the rising suspicion, a headless corpse was discovered lying at the gates of the Yun mansion. Judging by the build, clothing, and attire, the body was unmistakably that of the third master of the Yun family, who had been missing for several days. Examination revealed that he had frozen nearly to death before someone had slit his throat and severed his head. The discovery threw the entire Yun mansion into chaos, sending waves of panic rippling through every member of the clan. They searched frantically for third uncle's missing head, but of course, their efforts were in vain. That severed head, wrapped carefully in a square silk kerchief, had already been delivered to me by Prince Rui himself. When I lifted the edge of the kerchief, Prince Rui had expected me to recoil in shock or horror. A thick, pungent stench of blood assaulted my nostrils. Third uncle's eyes stared wide open in eternal defiance, fixed unblinkingly on me. I smiled coldly at his lifeless face, then turned to Xiao Shuangjiang and ordered him to burn the head to ashes. Third uncle had never made any serious enemies in his life, and Prince Rui had left not a single trace of evidence behind, try as they might. The Yun family would never be able to figure out who was responsible for his brutal murder. One death could be dismissed as an accident, but 2 deaths in quick succession were far too coincidental to ignore. 2 days later, the first master of the Yun family was found dead in his chambers, poisoned to death in his sleep. What sent chills down everyone's spines was the small, featureless puppet placed beside his corpse. A closer look revealed that the puppet's build and posture bore an uncanny resemblance to the one my elder sister had crafted 15 years ago, the very same puppet that had been burned to ashes in front of the entire clan. In that moment, every single member of the Yun family remembered the terrifying prophecy written in the family scroll. A cold dread settled in their hearts, and a sense of imminent doom hung over the mansion, leaving everyone living in fear of their own lives. There is something far more terrifying than death itself, knowing that a blade hangs over your head, yet never knowing when it will fall to claim your life. You are forced to live each day in the shadow of that sword, too paralyzed by fear to even grieve for the relatives you have lost. This was the fate I had endured when I was only 6 years old. Now, it was their turn to taste the same bitter medicine. With these 2 tasks successfully completed, Prince Rui came to collect his reward. Recently, the Minister of Revenue had retired, leaving the position vacant. The Crown Prince had recommended his own maternal uncle to the Emperor as a replacement, while Prince Rui was pushing for his own candidate, Xu Lang. On that day, the Emperor came to visit me in my palace, only to find me standing beneath a crabapple tree, wrapped in a thin silk cloak, lost in a daze. "What is the matter, Hua? Why do you look so downcast?" he asked, concerned. At first, I hesitated to speak. But unable to resist his repeated gentle inquiries, I finally choked back my tears and told him, my voice trembling with emotion, "It seems that the Crown Princess really does not like me very much, although I had altered my appearance. The late Empress had originally borne a striking resemblance to my mother. In truth, my changes had been minimal. Close inspection would still reveal faint traces of my original features. It was precisely for this reason that Yun Yu had felt an instinctive revulsion toward me from the very first moment she laid eyes on me. What happened? Tell father everything in detail, the Emperor urged. The Imperial Household Department recently acquired a new batch of sparrowhawk coal. They were supposed to send a portion to me, but when the Crown Princess found out about it, she ordered them to send the entire batch to the Eastern Palace instead. I explained, "It is not the coal that upsets me, father. What worries me is that if the Crown Princess dislikes me so much, she might turn the Crown Prince against me too. If that happens, how will I ever be able to live in peace here?" I glanced up at the Emperor, twisting my handkerchief nervously, and said in a timid voice, "I know I should not repeat idle gossip to you, father, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." The Emperor patted my shoulder gently, reassuring me, Hua, you can tell me anything. Do not hold back. They say that before I came back, you doted on the Crown Prince more than anyone else in the world. But now that I am here, you have shared your love and affection with me, and that is why the Crown Prince has grown so resentful toward me, I whispered, when I mentioned the incident with the sparrowhawk coal. The Emperor had not reacted strongly, dismissing it as a trivial catfight between 2 young women, but upon hearing my subsequent words, his expression darkened instantly, his brows furrowed deeply, and he let out a cold, angry shout. Presumptuous! How dare he meddle in who I choose to dote on? I am still sitting on this throne, and already he thinks he can dictate my actions. The Emperor personally escorted me to the Eastern Palace, ordering the Crown Princess to hand over the entire batch of sparrowhawk coal that she had seized. Originally, he had only intended to use this incident as a way to warn the Crown Prince to behave himself, but while he was in the Eastern Palace, he happened to stumble upon a letter hidden inside a desk drawer. It was a letter written by the Crown Prince's maternal uncle, delivered to the Eastern Palace only the previous night. Xiao Shuangjiang had found out about the letter and informed me of its existence that very night. Before dawn, he had snuck into the Eastern Palace and placed the letter under a pot of asparagus fern, ensuring that the Emperor would find it. The Emperor noticed the paper tucked beneath the fern and ordered a servant to fetch it for him. The more he read, the darker his face became, his anger mounting with every word. In truth, The letter did not contain anything particularly incriminating. It was merely the Crown Prince's uncle reminding him once again about the vacant position of Minister of Revenue, and reaffirming that even though the noble consort, the Crown Prince's mother, had passed away long ago, they were still family, and that he would rally the entire clan to support the Crown Prince's bid for the throne. The Emperor would never tolerate anyone attempting to usurp his imperial power. His hands trembled with rage as he rounded on the Crown Prince, roaring his fury. "I am not dead yet. Are you already so eager to fill my court with your own lackeys?" The Crown Prince was immediately confined to his quarters as punishment. His maternal uncle, of course, lost all chance of being appointed as the new Minister of Revenue. The position was instead given to Xu Lang, the candidate recommended by Prince Rui. Prince Rui was thoroughly satisfied with this outcome. "You truly did not disappoint me, sister. But I must ask, how did you know about that letter?" I did not answer his question, instead taking my time to savor a cup of fine white tea imported from Anji. Prince Rui was a shrewd judge of character. Seeing that I had no intention of elaborating, he did not press the matter further. Instead, he placed his hand on my shoulder once more, leaning down to whisper in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "Then, sister, let us continue to work happily together," he murmured. I had barely enjoyed 2 days of peace when another disaster struck the Yun mansion. This time, however, it was a genuine accident, completely unrelated to my machinations. One of my young cousins had suddenly suffered a violent convulsion and collapsed into a coma. When he finally woke up, he was burning with a high fever, screaming "Help me, save me," over and over again. The family physicians were summoned, but their treatments proved completely ineffective. The poor boy had breathed his last the previous night. With death after death striking the mansion in quick succession, everyone was convinced that they were being cursed by the family scroll's prophecy. Living in a state of constant terror and paranoia, Yun Hachin could no longer sit idly by and watch his family being destroyed one by one. He hurried into the palace to seek out Yun Ryu, desperate for answers. For over 100 years, only 2 truly lifelike puppets had ever been crafted in the history of the Yun family. One was the puppet made by my elder sister, now nothing but a pile of ashes, burned to cinders by Yun Hachin's own hands. The other was none other than Xiao Shuangjiang, currently residing in the Eastern Palace as Yun Ryu's prized possession. Yun Hachin's suspicions had finally fallen on Xiao Shuangjiang. He told Yun Ryu everything about the family prophecy and the string of recent tragedies that had befallen the Yun family, then pressed her relentlessly, demanding to know the truth about who had really crafted the puppet she had presented at the family head competition. "You are also listed in the Yun family genealogy now," he said, his voice heavy with urgency, trying to reason with her. "If the prophecy really does come true and our entire clan is slaughtered, do you think you will be spared?" At first, Yun Ryu had refused to admit the truth, but seeing that the matter now involved the lives of her entire family, she finally nodded her head, confessing reluctantly, "It was Yun Yuan who made it." Yun Hachin did not blame her for hiding this secret all along. He merely let out a deep, sorrowful sigh and made his decision. Yuan's veins run with Yun family blood, and she is the 8th-generation daughter. No wonder our family has been plagued by so many strange misfortunes lately. He muttered, more to himself than to Yun Ryu. She is already dead, according to everyone. So now, the only thing left to do is destroy her puppet and break the curse once and for all, he declared. And so, they made their terrible decision. They were going to burn Xiao Shuangjiang to ashes. Burning a puppet inside the imperial palace would have been a blatant violation of palace rules and etiquette. Thus, Yun Hachin devised a plan to smuggle Xiao Shuangjiang out of the palace first before carrying out his grim task. He seemed to harbor a strange, inexplicable fear of Xiao Shuangjiang. Before transporting him, he ordered his servants to cover the puppet's head and face with a piece of red cloth. As if afraid to look directly at him, it was on the palace road that I chanced upon him, his entourage hurrying along with the covered puppet in tow. "Master Yun," I called out, my voice cool and composed, stopping him in his tracks. "You seem to be in quite a hurry. Where are you off to in such a rush?" My eyes drifted to the puppet behind him. "Is that not the puppet that the crown princess claimed to have crafted herself? Why is it in your hands?" Yun Hutchin quickly fell to his knees, kowtowing to me in a panic, and began to stammer out an explanation. "The crown princess is now of such noble status that she no longer has any use for performing puppet shows. She said that this puppet is merely gathering dust in the Eastern Palace, serving no purpose, and that it would be better off being returned to the Yun family for safekeeping." Behind him, Xiao Shuangjiang, his head and face hidden beneath the red cloth, was subtly moving his fingers, gesturing at me to come closer, a silent plea for help. "No purpose," I repeated, a faint, cold smile playing on my lips. I walked slowly over to stand beside Yun Hutchin. Then, hidden from view by the voluminous sleeves of my imperial robes, quietly slipped my hand into Xiao Shuangjiang's. "This princess happens to be quite fond of this puppet. Instead of sending it back to the Yun family, you will deliver it to my palace, the Yiming Palace, at once," I ordered. Yun Hutchin looked up at me in stunned disbelief. "But Your Highness, this is," he began, his voice trailing off, too terrified to finish his sentence. "What, do you dare to refuse me?" I snapped, my expression instantly hardening, all trace of my earlier smile vanishing as I glared at him coldly. "No, of course not," Yun Hutchin stammered, breaking out in a cold sweat, his mind racing as he struggled to come up with a plausible excuse. After a long, tense moment, he finally blurted out, "This puppet is an exquisite masterpiece, Your Highness. It is the sacred treasure of the Yun family. Passed down through generations, it cannot be casually gifted to anyone." "But earlier, you just said that it was useless," I pointed out, my tone sharp with accusation. Without another word, I raised my hand and struck him hard across the face. The sound of the slap echoing loudly in the empty palace corridor. "I was merely being polite just now," I hissed, my voice dripping with icy fury. "But it seems you have taken my kindness for weakness and dared to push your luck too far. Today, you have two choices," I declared, my voice ringing with absolute authority. "Either you deliver this puppet to the Yiming Palace immediately, or you can die right here, right now. The choice is yours." Faced with the overwhelming power of the imperial princess, Yun Hutchin had no room to resist. Between dying at once and dying at a later date, the choice was obvious. Yun Hutchin stared at me, his face pale with terror, and kowtowed repeatedly. "Yes. This commoner will deliver it to Your Highness's palace at once." "Wait a moment," I called out, stopping him as he turned to leave. I stepped forward and took Xiao Shuangjiang from the servant's trembling hands, holding him gently in my arms. "This princess will take him back to my palace personally." Xiao Shuangjiang was a solitary soul who cherished his cleanliness above all else, abhorring physical contact with strangers. It would be far better for him to ride back to my palace in my own imperial palanquin. As we traveled along the palace road, Xiao Shuangjiang remained perfectly still, pretending to be nothing more than an ordinary, lifeless puppet. But beneath the red cloth covering his face, his eyes were filled with tender, adoring affection, fixed solely on me. My hand, still hidden within the folds of my sleeve, slowly intertwined with his. Emboldened by the knowledge that I could not reprimand him openly in front of the palace servants, Xiao Shuangjiang's courage grew bolder. He subtly adjusted his posture, then laced his fingers tightly through mine, holding my hand firmly in his. His thumb gently stroked the sensitive skin of my tiger's mouth, over and over again, though his touch was cold as ice. I could feel a warm, burning sensation spreading through my veins, a heat that had nothing to do with physical temperature. I carried Xiao Shuangjiang back to the Yiming Palace, No sooner had the palace doors closed behind us than he tore off the red cloth covering his head, looking at me with big, pleading eyes. His voice filled with genuine grievance. "I almost got burned to death today," he whined. "Disasters always linger for 1,000 years, I replied. A faint smile tugging at my lips as I took a silk handkerchief and began to wipe the dust from his face and body. "Do not worry, someone as resilient as you will live for 1,000 lifetimes, at least." Xiao Shuangjiang half closed his eyes, leaning his head against my shoulder, his voice soft and warm. "Aren't you afraid that Yun Hachan will go to Yun Ru for help, that they will use the Crown Prince's influence to force you to hand me back?" "I am not afraid," I said, running my fingers gently through his long, silky hair, speaking to him with absolute certainty. "I will go to see Father later. For a trivial matter like this, he will surely grant my request without hesitation." I looked into his eyes, my voice sincere and reassuring. "As long as I am here, you have nothing to fear. You can rest easy." Xiao Shuangjiang let out a soft, contented laugh, pressing my hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to my knuckles. "Then now, at long last, I can finally stand by your side openly, without having to hide anymore," he murmured. Just as I had predicted, Yun Hachan immediately went to find Yun Ru, and Yun Ru, in turn, rushed to the Eastern Palace to beg the Crown Prince for help. Determined to use his authority to force me to return Xiao Shuangjiang to them, the Emperor dismissed the matter with a scoff, reprimanding the Crown Prince sharply. "It is merely a puppet. If your sister likes it, let her keep it. As the heir apparent to the throne, is this trivial squabble really worth your time and effort?" The Crown Prince was left tongue-tied by the Emperor's rebuke, forced to take Yun Ru and return to the Eastern Palace in dejected silence. Yun Ru continued to pester and wheedle him relentlessly, but gradually, the Crown Prince grew tired of her constant nagging and refused to involve himself any further. United hand in hand, Prince Rui and I launched a two-pronged attack. He openly undermined the Crown Prince's authority in the imperial court, while I secretly schemed against him from within the palace harem. Trapped in this coordinated siege, the Crown Prince suffered one defeat after another, his power dwindling day by day, with his position growing increasingly precarious. He had far more pressing concerns than indulging in romantic entanglements or meddling in the Yun family's affairs. In hindsight, the Crown Prince suddenly realized that his string of misfortunes had all begun the very day I entered the palace. Determined to turn the tide, he resolved to find a way to drive me out of the palace once and for all. He went to the Emperor and argued his case, saying that Princess Chowning was already of marriageable age. For an ordinary imperial princess, she would not only be married by now, she would likely have children of her own. Prince Rui, however, countered that I had only just returned to the palace after being separated from the Emperor for so many years. I should be allowed to spend more time accompanying my father, and there was no need to rush my marriage. Seizing the opportunity, the Crown Prince put forward a proposal. He suggested that Xu Lang, the newly appointed Minister of Revenue, was a man of exceptional talent and distinguished appearance, and that he was still unmarried. He would make an excellent husband for me. Xu Lang was Prince Rui's trusted ally, and imperial consorts in our dynasty were permitted to participate in court politics. The Crown Prince had no intention of winning me over to his side. By forcing me to marry Xu Lang, he would only strengthen the alliance between Prince Rui and me. He was effectively throwing me into Prince Rui's camp, calculating that this move would serve his own political agenda. To the Crown Prince's surprise, Prince Rui readily accepted this arrangement. Far from opposing the marriage, he even echoed the Crown Prince's words, praising Xu Lang as an ideal match for me. The Emperor pondered the matter for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Hua Hua is indeed of an age to be married. It is time for her to settle down. Xu Lang, yes, I think he would make an excellent husband for you, he said, looking at me with a warm, fatherly smile. News of the emperor's intention to bestow a marriage upon me and Xu Lang spread like wildfire throughout the palace. By the time the gossip reached my ears, I was quietly sitting in my chambers, carefully cutting a new set of clothes for Xiao Shuangjiang. A palace eunuch arrived shortly after, bearing a portrait of Xu Lang, and smiled obsequiously as he presented it to me. Your Highness, the Xu family is a prestigious clan with a history spanning 100 years. Minister Xu was once the third-place winner in the imperial examinations, and he is widely renowned as one of the most handsome men in the capital. He is truly a perfect match for your Highness. The Emperor is very pleased with this arrangement. The Emperor has sent this old servant to sound out your Highness's feelings. Are you satisfied with this choice? I unrolled the scroll and studied the portrait carefully. The man depicted had delicate, refined features and a gentle, modest demeanor, truly the epitome of a noble, scholarly gentleman. The Crown Prince was a clever man. He had chosen a candidate that neither the Emperor, Prince Rui, nor I could easily refuse. After a long moment of silence, I rolled up the portrait and smiled faintly at the eunuch. Please inform my father that I will abide by his decision in all matters. As soon as the words left my lips, I heard a faint movement from behind the folding screen where Xiao Shuangjiang had been hiding. He was always so composed and self-restrained in front of others, but today, he could no longer contain his emotions. Before the eunuch could even step over the threshold of my palace, Xiao Shuangjiang emerged from behind the screen, slammed the door shut with a loud bang, and glared down at me, his eyes blazing with jealousy. Was that man in the portrait really that good-looking? He ground out between gritted teeth. He is quite handsome, I replied, holding out the portrait to him. Why don't you take a look for yourself? He really is not bad. He let out a cold, disdainful snort, then suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist, his fingers tightening around it like a vice. So you are just going to marry him like that? What about me? What am I supposed to do? The palace courtyard was deep and quiet. The imperial halls bathed in a desolate, melancholic silence. Xiao Shuangjiang stared at me intently, waiting for my answer, his eyes burning with a fierce, desperate intensity. I traced the delicate lines of his face with my gaze, as if painting his features all over again. But you are a puppet, Xiao Shuangjiang. You are not human. What do you expect me to do with a puppet? What if I am a puppet? He retorted, tightening his grip on my wrist and forcing me to step backward, inch by inch, until my back was pressed firmly against the wall behind the screen. His stunningly handsome face loomed large before my eyes, his voice dropping to a low, seductive whisper that sent shivers down my spine. Don't you like me? I leaned back slightly, putting a small distance between us, my voice deliberately cold and indifferent. Why would I like a puppet? You really don't like me? He asked, refusing to back down. He took my hand and pressed it against his cheek, his eyes softening into a pool of tender affection, warm and clear like spring water rippling in the sunlight, stirring my heartstrings uncontrollably. You were the one who painted my eyes with your own brush, who dyed my eyebrows with your own ink. You crafted my face exactly as you pleased, made me in your own perfect image. I was born for you, and you alone. We are destined to be together, aren't we? In front of you, I can be both humble and gentle, or utterly unyielding. Right and wrong mean nothing to me, only your wishes matter. My every word, every action, will always be yours to command. Xiao Shuangjiang lowered his head, his other hand caressing my lips softly, his touch feather-light yet electric. Master, your heart burns with a fire that cannot be quenched by mere words. Are you really willing to let it be extinguished so easily? I turned my head away, closing my eyes tightly, trying to ignore the fluttering in my chest. Xiao Shuangjiang, let go of me. Do not be so presumptuous. Presumptuous, he murmured, his hand sliding slowly down my neck, resting gently over my heart, feeling the rapid, frantic beat beneath his fingertips. Then explain to me why your heart is racing so fast right now. Is it possible that you have fallen in love with me, a mere puppet? My breath caught in my throat, my mind going blank for a moment. Xiao Shuangjiang was right. I had painted his eyes exactly as I liked them, sculpted his features to match my every preference. He was everything I had ever dreamed of in a partner. We had danced around this delicate, ambiguous line for so long, never daring to cross it. Now that he had suddenly torn down the barrier between us, I felt utterly flustered and confused, unsure whether to move forward or retreat. Xiao Shuangjiang, I whispered his name, my voice hoarse and trembling. A shadow fell over me, warm and familiar. Then, gently, he lifted me off my feet, holding me securely in his arms, my body floating weightlessly in the air. If you don't like me, why is your voice so hoarse? He asked softly, his lips brushing against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. And haven't you noticed, you never once tried to push me away? As he spoke, a soft, triumphant smile tugged at his lips, the crimson tear mole at the corner of his eye glinting like a plum blossom blooming bravely in the depths of winter. In the end, I was the first to surrender, my resolve crumbling like sandcastles against the tide. This marriage will never happen. I never intended to marry him. Xiao Shuangjiang froze in surprise, his eyes widening. What? Do you remember? Before we helped him get promoted to Minister of Revenue, I asked you to investigate his background thoroughly. I explained, finally allowing myself to relax in his arms, wrapping my arms around his neck. Xu Lang is already 29 years old. A man of his status and talent should have been married long ago. Over the years, countless matchmakers have visited the Xu mansion on his behalf, but he has never agreed to any of the proposals. There must be a reason why he refuses to marry, and I am not going to be the one to change his mind. The emperor had expressed his intention to bestow the marriage, but the imperial edict had not yet been issued. Seizing this crucial window of opportunity, I begged the emperor to allow me to leave the palace for a short while. I made no attempt to hide my plans to go out into the city. On the contrary, I instructed my maids to spread the word deliberately. Sure enough, as I sat drinking tea in the Chunlan tea house, a servant arrived bearing a visiting card, requesting an audience with me. There was only one word written on the card, neat and concise: Xu. Just as I had anticipated, Xu Lang had come to see me, having seen his portrait before. I recognized him the moment he walked into the tea house, but as I looked at him in the flesh, a strange sense of familiarity washed over me, as if I had met him somewhere long ago. Minister Xu, are you here to enjoy the tea ceremony as well? I asked, gesturing for him to sit opposite me. Xu Lang studied me silently for a moment, his gaze sharp and perceptive. He wasted no time beating around the bush, cutting straight to the chase. I have heard that the emperor intends to bestow a marriage between you and me, Your Highness. I wonder what your thoughts are on this matter. I smiled at him, my expression calm and composed. Minister Xu is a man of distinguished appearance and great talent, rising to such a high position at such a young age. You are, without a doubt, an excellent match. He fell silent for a long moment, then suddenly rose to his feet, stepped back, and knelt down before me with a thud. His posture humble yet resolute. I dare not hide the truth from Your Highness, he said, his voice steady and sincere. The reason I have not married all these years is because I have long been in love with someone else. I looked down at him, not bothering to tell him to rise. My curiosity piqued. You are not young anymore. If you have loved someone for so long, why have you not married her? Why wait until now? Xu Lang's usually calm and composed voice softened, tinged with a hint of helplessness and bitter sorrow. Because the woman I wish to marry is already dead, I can never make her my wife. I was even more confused now, setting down my teacup, completely forgetting about the tea and pastries in front of me. If she is dead, then what is stopping you from marrying me? Xu Lang kowtowed deeply to me, his voice ringing out clear and firm, filled with unwavering devotion. She is gone, but to me, I will always be her widower. I poured him a cup of fine feng xiao tea, pushing it across the table toward him. Then why have you come to see me today? What do you expect this princess to do for you? He lowered his head even further, adopting a posture of utmost humility and deference, begging me earnestly, I implore your highness to intercede with the emperor and persuade him to withdraw this imperial edict. You are a woman of unparalleled beauty and grace, beloved by all. There are countless men in this world who would give anything to marry you. Why waste your time on a man like me, a man with a dead heart? I did not reply immediately, instead gazing down at him, studying his expression carefully. He lifted his head, meeting my gaze directly, his eyes calm and unflinching, showing neither arrogance nor servility. If you do not mind, Minister Shu, could you tell me who this woman was? I asked softly. Shu Lang hesitated for a moment, then finally made up his mind. His voice filled with tender longing. The woman I have loved all my life. She was from the Yun family. My hand trembled so violently that I almost dropped my teacup, my eyes widening in shock. The Yun family? Do you mean the family of puppet makers that has been famous for generations? Yes, he replied simply. I finally understood why I had found him so familiar. When I was 6 years old, my elder sister had died because of a puppet she had crafted with her own hands. A puppet that looked exactly like a real person, tall and elegant, with a face of incomparable beauty. I had only seen it for a fleeting moment, but its image had been burned into my memory forever. Now, as I looked at Shu Lang, his face slowly overlapped with the face of that puppet in my mind. The only difference was that the puppet had looked so young, so innocent, so full of life. A cold chill ran down my spine, my voice trembling as I asked the question I had been dreading to hear. The woman you are talking about, is she Yun Ru, who died 15 years ago? You know Rua, Shu Lang exclaimed, looking at me in stunned disbelief. It had been 15 years since I had heard anyone call my elder sister by her given name. After her death, no one in the Yun family had ever dared to mention her name again. She was not just dead, she had been erased from their memories, like she had never existed at all. Only in my dreams, night after night, did I remind myself not to forget her. For death is not the end of life, forgetfulness is. Until today, after all these long years, I had finally heard someone else say her name, Rua. I was not the only one who remembered her. In a corner of the world I had never known, someone had been silently mourning her for 15 long years. In that moment, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I know her. I tilted my head back, staring up at the ceiling of the tea house, trying my best to hold back my tears, not wanting them to fall. Do not kneel there anymore. The tea is getting cold. Get up and drink with me. Shu Lang rose to his feet and sat down opposite me, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. After a long, awkward silence, he finally spoke up, his voice hesitant. You knew Rua, didn't you? When you heard her name, your reaction was very strong. Shu Lang, I said, ignoring his question, choosing instead to look him straight in the eyes. Do you know how Yun Ru really died? She fell into a well by accident and drowned, he replied, his voice softening with sorrow. I remember that her mother tried to save her and ended up dying with her on the same day. But do you really think that someone like Yun Ru, so careful, so gentle, so full of life, would have been so careless as to fall into a well? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, guiding him gently toward the truth. And tell me, what are the odds that a mother and daughter would both die on the exact same day? Is that not just a little too coincidental? People who drown will have their bodies swollen and disfigured by water. Why don't you go to the Yun mansion and investigate? Find out what her body really looked like when she was pulled out of that well. Shu Lang stared at me, his face draining of color, his eyes widening in shock and disbelief. He was a clever man, a man of great intelligence. Sometimes, all it takes is a single hint to make someone see the truth. How does your highness know her? he asked, looking at me with confusion and suspicion. And how do you know all these things? You need not concern yourself with that, I replied, choosing not to reveal the truth, my eyes fixed firmly on his. But you would do well to follow this lead. To find out exactly what happened all those years ago. If it really was just an accident, then so be it. But if she died an unjust death, then all these years you have spent mourning her have been for nothing. With that, I drained my cup of white tea in one gulp. Rest assured, Minister Shu, I understand your purpose in coming here today. I will speak to my father and persuade him to abandon this idea of bestowing a marriage upon us. As I pushed open the sandalwood door of the tea house to leave, I heard the sound of knees hitting the floor behind me. Shu Lang knelt down straight and tall, his back rigid with resolve. This humble subject owes your highness a great debt. I will repay it to you, no matter what it takes. Convincing the emperor to postpone the marriage was not difficult at all. All I had to do was act coquettishly in front of him, saying that after being separated for so many years, I had only just been reunited with my father and wanted to spend more time accompanying him. The emperor ate this up. Although he did not completely abandon the idea of arranging my marriage, he agreed to put the matter off until the start of the new year. In the meantime, Shu Lang began his investigation into the Yun mansion. 15 years had passed, making the investigation far from easy, but he managed to track down one of the witnesses from that fateful day, my eldest cousin. Beneath Shu Lang's gentle and scholarly exterior lay a man capable of ruthless methods. My eldest cousin was a tough nut to crack, so Shu Lang resorted to brutal torture methods, combing his flesh with iron combs, branding him with red-hot irons, placing an iron mask over his face to crush his skull. Unable to bear the pain any longer, my cousin finally broke down and confessed everything. He revealed the true story of how my sister had been murdered all those years ago, and spoke of the terrifying prophecy that hung over the Yun family like a dark cloud. Shu Lang finally learned the truth that my sister had died because of a puppet she had made, but he would never have the chance to see that puppet, the puppet that had been crafted in his own image. Armed with the truth, Shu Lang stood firmly against the Yun family, his resolve unshakable. His plan was exactly the same as mine. We did not slaughter the entire clan all at once. Instead, we hung the sword of Damocles over the heads of every member of the Yun family. Every now and then, we let that sword fall randomly, claiming another victim. Beside each corpse, there would always be a small puppet, sitting there and smiling innocently at whoever found the body. It was as if fate itself was at work. 15 years ago, my sister's puppet had been burned to ashes. 15 years later, the man who had been the model for that puppet was now avenging her death, slaughtering the entire Yun family one by one. After the 6th member of the Yun family had died, a sudden fire broke out in my Yiming palace. The fire started late at night. I was half asleep when I was jolted awake by the sound of crackling flames and the acrid smell of smoke filling the air. Tongues of fire licked at everything in their path. The roof beams collapsed in an instant, crushing folding screens, wooden cabinets, and long couches into splinters. After the palace servants had dragged me to safety, I realized that the fire in the side hall was burning far more fiercely than the one in the main hall. The side hall had always been unoccupied, but because I was in the main hall, all the firefighters rushed there, pouring buckets of water onto the flames. As a result, the fire in the side hall raged unchecked, the flames dancing wildly, consuming everything in their path. Xiao Shuangjiang was usually kept in that side hall. I had never imagined that the Yun family would be bold enough to set fire to the imperial palace. This fire had been deliberately set with one target in mind, Xiao Shuangjiang. I stood frozen in front of the side hall, my mind going completely blank, filled with only one thought. Xiao Shuangjiang was terrified of fire. What would he do, trapped alone in that inferno? My body reacted faster than my mind. I threw on my inner robe, ran barefoot toward the burning side hall. ignoring the screams of the palace servants behind me. "Your Highness, what are you doing? Your Highness, come back at once. The fire in the side hall is too fierce, you will be killed." The fire raged like a mad beast, spreading in all directions, devouring everything in its path without mercy. Even standing at the doorway, I could feel the searing heat waves rolling toward me, engulfing me in a wave of utter despair. With a fire this intense, there was no way Xiao Shuangjiang could have survived. He must have already been burned to ashes. The palace servants behind me grabbed me tightly, pulling me back with all their strength, preventing me from taking even one step into the burning hall. My knees gave way beneath me, and I collapsed to the ground, trembling violently, tears streaming down my face. I suddenly felt a wave of overwhelming regret. I should never have made Xiao Shuangjiang sleep in the side hall. He had wanted to sleep in my room, to share my bed. I should have let him. At least then, he would still be safe. Just as I was overcome with grief and despair, I heard a palace servant's voice, filled with confusion and surprise. Why is that puppet here? Did someone carry him out of the fire?" Following her gaze, I slowly turned my head, my eyes widening in disbelief. There, standing beneath the crabapple tree not far away, was Xiao Shuangjiang. He stood tall and straight, like a slender bamboo, his black hair like satin, fluttering gently in the wind. Surrounded by so many people, he could not move, could not speak. He could only look at me silently from afar, his eyes filled with tender affection and concern. In that moment, I felt a lump rise in my throat, and tears poured down my face uncontrollably. Hidden beneath the sleeves of his robe, his hand lifted slightly, as if he wanted to reach out and wipe away my tears. But he could not, so I wiped the tears away myself, forcing a smile onto my face as I looked at him through my blurry vision. The flickering flames cast a warm glow on his exquisite face, making him look even more beautiful than usual. He stood there quietly, waiting for me to walk toward him. I lifted the hem of my robe and walked toward him step by step, a wild, absurd thought popping into my head. How could I ever explain to the world that I had fallen in love with a puppet that I had crafted with my own two hands? Taking advantage of the chaos as the palace servants fought the fire, I slipped my hand into his, my voice trembling with relief. I was so scared just now, scared in the same way I had been scared when I lost my sister and my mother all those years ago. He leaned down slightly, pressing a gentle kiss to the corner of my eye, wiping away the remaining tears with his lips. "Do not be afraid, I am very good at looking after myself, Xiao Shuangjiang," I whispered, my voice soft and fragile. He replied, his breath warm against my ear. "Winter is coming again. The nights are so cold. Will you stay with me?" The gentle moonlight filled his eyes, turning them into pools of silver. He smiled softly, his voice filled with infinite tenderness. "I will do anything you ask." Naturally, the fire in the Yiming Palace shocked the entire imperial palace. The emperor ordered a thorough investigation into the matter. Yunaryu had acted too hastily, too carelessly. Inevitably, the investigation traced the arson back to her. At first, she refused to admit her guilt, but with both witnesses and physical evidence stacked against her, she had no choice but to confess. She raged that it was all my fault, that I had stolen her puppet from her. Setting fire to the palace had been her only way to destroy that puppet once and for all. The emperor was furious. He declared that she was completely unworthy of her position as crown princess, that she had neither the virtue nor the character to be the future mother of the nation. He wanted to strip her of her title and throw her into prison, but the crown prince begged him on his knees, weeping blood, until the emperor finally relented and spared her life. Instead, Yunaryu was sentenced to a severe caning and placed under house arrest for 6 months. She had not known that she was pregnant. After the brutal caning, she began to bleed profusely. It was only when she miscarried that she finally realized she had been carrying a child in her womb. When I visited her in the Eastern Palace, She looked haggard and pale, a far cry from her usual lively and charming self. "I suppose you have not been getting much news lately," I said, helping her tuck the quilt around her shoulders, my voice soft and sweet. "Let me fill you in. Your father went to a wine shop the other day and accidentally fell down the stairs. But he is lucky, he only broke one leg." Yun pressed her lips together tightly, her voice cold and indifferent. "He is not my real father anyway. If he broke his leg, he can just stay in bed and recover." "True," I said, nodding in agreement. "Compared to him, your mother was not so lucky." She suddenly sat up straight in bed, her eyes widening in shock. "What happened to my mother?" "She never fully recovered from her miscarriage," I explained, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "And when she heard about what happened to you in the palace, she was so worried that she could not sleep at night. I felt so sorry for her that I sent a physician to the Yun mansion to treat her. The physician said her illness was caused by internal heat. So he told her to switch to thin quilts and summer clothes to cool down." I let out a soft sigh, shaking my head in feigned regret. "Your mother's health was really poor, she could not stand the cold at all. I just received the news this morning. She is dead." When they found her body, she was already completely frozen stiff. With that, I turned and left, ignoring the sound of Yun's screams of grief and rage behind me, as a prisoner under house arrest. She was not even allowed to leave the Eastern Palace, let alone go to the Yun mansion to attend her mother's funeral. Her mother had spent her entire life scheming and plotting for her, clawing her way to the position of crown princess. But it was precisely because of that position that Yun could not even see her mother off one last time. How ironic! Just before I stepped out of the door, Yun's voice rang out behind me, hoarse with hatred and venom. "Did you come here today just to kick me while I am down? Princess Chowning, it is far too early for you to celebrate your victory. Enjoy your little triumph while the crown prince is still not on the throne. When he finally ascends, you will be crying bitter tears and you will remember these good old days." I curved my lips into a faint smile, then turned and walked away without a backward glance. The Crown Prince and Prince Rui were locked in a bitter power struggle in the imperial court. It was still anyone's guess who would emerge as the next emperor of this nation. Because of the fire, the emperor felt deeply guilty toward me. He asked me what reward I wanted for my suffering. I knelt before him, tears streaming down my face, my voice trembling with fear. "I do not want any reward, Father. I am just so terrified." This time, it was the crown princess who tried to burn my puppet. But what about next time? What if someone tries to kill me? I know that Father will always protect me, but after this incident, I cannot sleep at night. Every time I close my eyes, I see nothing but those raging flames. The emperor fell silent, deep in thought. After a long moment, he finally spoke up. Hua, if I give you command of the left guards, will that make you feel safer?" Panic flashed across my face for a split second, then was quickly replaced by overwhelming joy. I knelt down and kowtowed to him, my voice filled with gratitude. "I am deeply grateful for Father's love and generosity. Your daughter thanks you from the bottom of her heart. There is one more thing," I said, resting my head on his knees, my voice soft and vulnerable. "Father, can you let me stay by your side for a few more years, after everything that has happened? I realize how fragile life is. I just want to spend more time with you." The emperor stroked my head gently, his eyes filled with love and compassion. "Very well, you are my daughter. You can stay in the palace for as long as you wish." After I was given command of the left guards, Prince Rui came to congratulate me personally. Because of Yun's actions, the emperor felt that the crown prince was far too indulgent in his love affairs, that he lacked the necessary resolve and discipline to be a good ruler. He was deeply disappointed in his eldest son. This was undoubtedly a clear signal to Prince Rui, emboldening him even further in his ambition to seize the throne. After Prince Rui left, Xiao Shuangjiang lifted the quilt and pulled me gently into his arms. The moment his hands touched mine, he frowned slightly, a look of concern crossing his face. "Master, have you been feeling unwell lately? Other than the occasional dizziness I have always had, I feel fine," I replied truthfully, looking at him with a hint of unease. "Why do you ask?" Xiao Shuangjiang fell silent for a moment, then pulled me even closer to him, his arms tightening around me protectively. "I feel like your body is getting colder and colder. I do not know if it is just my imagination, but you should ask the imperial physicians to examine you tomorrow." The next day, the imperial physician who came to take my pulse paid special attention to my body temperature. After a long, careful examination, he finally spoke up. "Your Highness, your body temperature is indeed lower than that of an ordinary person." He checked my pulse and examined my tongue carefully, then shook his head. "But your Highness's body is otherwise perfectly healthy. Other than your cold limbs, there are no other symptoms of illness." Finally, he tried to reassure me. "Does your Highness often feel cold?" "Yes," I replied. "I have always been afraid of the cold since I was a child. It is winter now. Cold hands and feet are often a sign of insufficient qi and blood," the physician explained. "I will prescribe some herbal medicine for you to replenish your qi and blood. If you take it regularly with ginseng soup, it should help improve your condition." I followed the physician's advice meticulously, but I drank the medicine for months. Spring came, and still, my body remained icy cold. Even when I massaged the emperor's head, he noticed how cold my hands were. He sent for a whole new team of imperial physicians to treat me, but their efforts were in vain. By the time summer arrived, I stopped sweating altogether. Meanwhile, of the 29 members of the Yun family, 4 had divorced their spouses and left the clan, 1 had been disowned, and 17 had died violent deaths. Rumors spread that many members of the Yun family had gone completely mad. Some fled the capital in terror, while others locked themselves in their mansions, refusing to go outside. But no matter where they ran, the executioner always found them. He was never late. Compared to the others, my father was the most deranged of all. He burned all the puppets in the mansion, then locked himself in his courtyard, refusing to see anyone. He had lost 1 eye and broken 1 leg. On the day he had another arm hacked off, a sudden and shocking event occurred in the imperial court, an event that would change everything, and it involved the Crown Prince. 15. The Crown Prince encountered Yun Yu outside the palace. Yun Yu, who was supposed to be confined to the Eastern Palace under house arrest. Even though she wore a veil over her hat, a light breeze fluttered the thin silk, and he recognized his wife at a glance. Yun Yu walked in a hurry. When she reached the alley, she glanced left and right, as if waiting for someone to arrive. Before long, a tall man approached her, slipped an arm around her shoulders, and the two walked hand in hand toward a mansion ahead. They chatted and laughed, their posture intimate and ambiguous, born into imperial luxury. The Crown Prince was a man of supreme status. How could he tolerate being cuckolded? The mansion ahead was none other than the general's residence. The general's only son was of exactly the same build as the man who had his arm around Yun Yu. Enraged, the Crown Prince banged on the gate of the general's residence in the middle of the night. After berating General Song furiously, he led his guards straight to the backyard. In the backyard, young Master Song was wearing his nightclothes, his eyes bleary with sleep. There was no sign of Yun Yu anywhere near him. But the Crown Prince had seen them enter the general's residence with his own eyes. He was convinced he had not been mistaken. Blinded by rage, the Crown Prince acted on impulse and ordered his men to search the entire general's residence. Yet there was no trace of Yun Yu to be found. The Crown Prince never knew that what he had seen in the moonlight were nothing more than 2 puppets, and I was the one manipulating those puppets from the shadows. The general's residence was built right by the river. The 2 puppets had never actually entered the mansion. They had merely leaped into the river, then drifted along the current back into my hands. The Crown Prince knew nothing of this. His search proved futile, and he returned defeated. But General Song refused to let the matter rest. He went straight to the emperor to complain bitterly. My son was sound asleep in his bed at home, Your Majesty, he pleaded, yet the crown prince accused him of adultery, had him beaten, and even searched my entire residence. I beg Your Majesty to uphold justice for this old minister. General Song was a veteran statesman who had served 2 emperors. His words carried great weight in the emperor's ears. Lately, the crown prince's performance in the imperial court had already displeased the emperor. Learning of his absurd behavior, the emperor finally made up his mind to depose him as heir apparent. He publicly reprimanded the crown prince in court, declaring that he was unfit to be the future ruler of the nation. That day, however, the emperor did not depose the crown prince outright. The next day, he was set to depart for Mount Tai to perform the Fengshan ceremonies, a sacred ritual to honor heaven and earth. The emperor planned to announce the deposition only after the ceremonies were completed. For this trip to Mount Tai, he took me and Prince Rui along. The crown prince was the only one excluded from the entourage. After arriving at Mount Tai, I overheard palace servants gossiping about the crown princess. Even though all the servants of the Eastern Palace could testify that Yun Yu had stayed in her chambers that entire night, the crown prince still harbored suspicions. He even blamed Yun Yu for his impending deposition. Once a loving couple, they had fallen apart under the crushing weight of power and ambition, even though no other woman had ever come between them. Now that Yun Yu was in dire straits, the crown prince vented all his frustrations and resentment on her. I listened to the gossip as if it were a mere amusement, then turned and walked away. Most of the journey was spent in the carriage. Although I had brought Xiao Shuangjiang along, there were too many people around, making it impossible for him to move freely. Bored, I had someone bring me 2 pieces of fine quality wood, planning to carve a phoenix for fun. At first, I miscalculated the dimensions, making the phoenix's wings slightly too large. After tying silk threads to the tips of the wings, I joked with Xiao Shuangjiang, saying that this phoenix could carry a person to fly. As long as the threads were long enough, it could fly as far as 10 miles without any problem. Xiao Shuangjiang even said he wanted to test the puppet phoenix later. The journey back from Mount Tai was smooth and uneventful until we reached the outskirts of the capital. When the carriage suddenly jolted to a halt, a commotion erupted from the front of the procession. The clashing sound of swords and blades rang out continuously, and faint cries of "Protect the Emperor" echoed through the air. It was clear that someone had ambushed us on the road, and their target was none other than the Emperor. My carriage was at the back of the procession. Lifting the curtain, I glanced at the surrounding environment. We were halfway up a mountain slope. Dense forests lined both sides of the road, and the assassins had leaped out from those very woods. Their numbers were limited, but each of them was a loyal death soldier. They charged recklessly toward the Emperor's carriage. Leaving my side completely unharmed, the Imperial Guards quickly moved in to surround the assassins. Outnumbered, the assassins stood little chance of succeeding. But fate played a cruel trick. Behind this mountainside lay a steep cliff. Before the Imperial Guards could reach him, the assassins surrounded the Emperor, forcing him to step back step by step. The Emperor had already been backed up to the edge of the cliff. One more step backward, and he would plummet into the 100-foot abyss below, meet his demise. The Imperial Guards were separated from the Emperor by the assassins. They were helpless, unable to rush forward to save him. With a cliff at his back and assassins blocking his path, the Emperor had nowhere left to run. Just as an assassin raised his sword to strike, the Emperor dodged to the side, but he misstepped, lost his balance, and fell off the cliff. "Your Majesty!" The Imperial Guards screamed in horror. At that moment, they cast aside all caution and charged at the assassins with their swords raised. Some leaned over the cliff edge, craning their necks to see what had become of the Emperor. At that very instant, a white feathered phoenix spread its wings wide, let out a piercing cry, and emerged from the depths of the cliff. carrying the emperor on its back and flying toward the direction of the imperial palace. The imperial guards held their breath, their eyes fixed on the white-feathered phoenix, staring in stunned silence. "What are you standing there gawking for?" I shouted, manipulating the silk threads with one hand while ordering the guards, "Do not kill them all, leave some alive." When the phoenix finally exhausted its strength, I found the emperor. The emperor stared at me in a daze. "Hua hua, this phoenix, it is exactly the same as the one in my dream all those years ago." I froze for a long moment, then suddenly remembered, when I was 6 years old, the emperor had once had a vivid dream. He dreamed that he fell off a cliff, and a woman appeared with a puppet, saving his life. The puppet transformed into a white-feathered phoenix, carried him all the way north, and flew back to the imperial city. That woman had called herself the head of the Yun family. Because of that dream, the emperor had made a promise. If the next head of the Yun family was a woman, he would marry her to the crown prince and make her the crown princess. Perhaps it was the will of heaven that his dream had saved my life when I was a child. 16 years later, I had become the very woman who saved him in that dream. I once thought that the person who would save me would be the head of the Yun family. The emperor sighed as the north wind howled around us. I never imagined it would be my own daughter. Perhaps, if Yun Yu had not stolen Xiao Shuangjiang from me, I would have become the head of the Yun family. What happened in his dream was supposed to be the true starting point of fate, the original version of the story. He looked at me with increasingly tender affection, a warmth mixed with deep gratitude in his eyes. I clung to his sleeve, my voice trembling with lingering fear. "It is enough that father is safe." But no sooner had the words left my lips than I fainted. This time, I remained unconscious for a full 2 days before waking up. 16. When I opened my eyes, the emperor was sitting right beside my bed, keeping vigil. At the foot of the bed, a crowd of imperial physicians knelt in a row, their heads bowed low. The emperor suddenly flew into a violent rage. "All of you say that the princess's body is much colder than that of an ordinary person, but why can none of you find the cause? Clearly, last autumn and winter, her body was not this cold. You have been treating her for so long, and it has been completely useless." He hurled his teacup to the ground with a crash, the porcelain shattering into pieces. "Now the princess is unconscious, and none of you can even explain why, you bunch of useless quacks. What use is it for me to keep you around?" The imperial physicians kowtowed repeatedly, not daring to utter a single word in their defense. Every time the imperial physicians had examined me before, they had insisted that my body was perfectly healthy, that I only suffered from a deficiency of qi and blood. But lately, I had started to feel dizzy frequently. Even though I was wrapped in thick padded robes, my body remained icy cold. Just like Xiao Shuangjiang, I had no warmth left in me. Xiao Shuangjiang was beside himself with worry. He rushed to the imperial library and searched through every medical book there. But his efforts were in vain. This time, the imperial physicians prescribed a new tonic for me, but the emperor had already lost all faith in their medical skills. He sent people to invite famous doctors from outside the palace to diagnose me. The day I woke up, the truth behind the assassination attempt finally came to light. The person who had ordered the assassination of the emperor was none other than the crown prince himself. 17. The crown prince knew full well that once the emperor returned to the palace, he would be deposed as heir apparent. So he sent his secret band of death soldiers to lie in ambush on Yangtai Mountain on the outskirts of the capital. He had surveyed the terrain carefully, set up the ambush in advance, and waited for the perfect moment to strike when the emperor's carriage procession appeared. He was still the crown prince. As long as the emperor died, he could ascend the throne in a legitimate way. He was unwilling to become a deposed prince. For the sake of the imperial throne, he had gambled away his entire fortune and his own life. Originally, he had come so close to winning, but the consequences of defeat were brutal beyond measure. He was stripped of his royal title and reduced to a commoner. Then, a cup of poisoned wine ended his life. As for Yu. The emperor let out a cold snort. I originally thought that she would be the one to save my life, which is why I tolerated her so much. Since she is nothing but an empty title, utterly useless, then kill her too. Yu was also reduced to a commoner. A white silk ribbon was wrapped around her neck, and she followed the crown prince to the grave. Yu's death completely shattered the Yun family's dream of becoming imperial relatives, yet it did not stir the slightest ripple within the Yun family. They were too busy struggling to save their own lives to spare a thought for her. The incident of the deposed crown prince left the emperor both furious and heartbroken. After all, the crown prince had been his favorite son, raised and educated by his own hands, even when he had planned to depose him. The emperor had never intended to take his life, but this son, whom he had raised with his own two hands, had actually tried to kill his own father. The once vigorous emperor, who had been able to ride horses and shoot arrows with ease, was now gaunt and haggard, looking old and weary beyond his years. In contrast, Prince Rui was the one riding high on success, radiating confidence and ambition. Seeing that I was still unmarried and living in the palace, he came over to pester me again, trying to persuade me to marry. Sister, you are not getting any younger. What are you still doing staying in the palace? A woman's place is to marry, support her husband, and raise children. It is not right for you to be like this. Behind the folding screen, Xiao Shuangjiang gritted his teeth so hard that he nearly crushed them. Prince Rui went to the emperor to bring up the matter of my marriage again, and even asked the emperor to take back the command of the left guards that he had given me. But this time, the emperor shook his head firmly. Let her stay and accompany me a little longer. I am old now, and I cherish the time spent with my children more than anything. Famous doctors from outside the palace came to the imperial palace every few days to treat me, but my health still showed no signs of improvement, even though the room was filled with burning charcoal. I still had to wrap myself in an extra thick fur cloak to keep warm. Upon hearing this, Prince Rui came to sigh and complain again. The imperial physicians all say that there is nothing wrong with you, sister, yet you insist on making father invite all these doctors into the palace, causing him nothing but unnecessary trouble. After he left, Xiao Shuangjiang fetched some high-quality charcoal, lit the brazier, and muttered fiercely as he tended to the fire. I really want to stuff this charcoal right down his throat. I looked at him and smiled. Me too. Lately, the emperor not only no longer avoided me when discussing state affairs, but he also began to gradually guide me to participate in political decision-making. Some ministers in the court had proposed a land survey policy, aiming to inventory the land seized by local gentry and powerful landlords and return it to the common people, as soon as the land survey policy was put forward. The officials led by Prince Rui opposed it most fiercely. Their relatives and friends owned vast amounts of land in the Jiangnan region. The land survey policy would target their land first and foremost. During a discussion of state affairs in the imperial study, both Prince Rui and Xu Lang were present. Xu Lang was the only one among them who supported the land survey policy. Much to Prince Rui's displeasure, the emperor suddenly turned his head and asked for my opinion. Hua. What do you think of this policy? I believe returning the land to the people is truly a meritorious deed, I replied. When I lived outside the palace, I witnessed countless farmers toiling away for an entire year, only to have all their grain and money end up in the landlord's pockets. All they were left with was barely enough to keep themselves from starving. As I spoke, Prince Rui kept shooting me covert warning glances, trying to make me stop talking. When I stubbornly finished speaking, his expression darkened, and the look in his eyes as he stared at me turned faintly menacing. Alliances are only stable when there is a common enemy. Now that the crown prince had fallen from power, Prince Rui no longer needed to rely on me as he once did. Naturally, he cast aside his mask of peace and harmony. His gaze remained fixed on me, but my attention was drawn to Xu Lang. as we left the imperial study, I asked Xu Lang, since you follow Prince Rui, why do you support the land survey policy? Xu Lang stood with his hands behind his back on the palace path, his thin figure straight and upright. This humble subject does not align himself with any faction. I only stand with what is right, the right and wrong kind of right. But aren't you afraid of angering Prince Rui by acting like this? He lowered his eyes and eyebrows, replying with just 8 words, better to die speaking one's mind than live in silent submission, before he left. The sleeve of his robe brushed against the hem of my dress. He did not lift his head, his voice as ethereal as the north wind. Besides, the emperor has more than one son, does he not? We walked away in opposite directions, but our shadows overlapped beneath the moonlight. After the land survey policy was implemented, the relationship between Prince Rui and me gradually turned cold. At night, I would secretly conspire with Xiao Shuangjiang, plotting how to bring Prince Rui down from his position of power. In early spring, only Yun Hechen remained in the once Grand Yun mansion. Following my instructions, Xu Lang escorted him to the graves of my mother and elder sister. Xu Lang kicked him hard in the back of his knees. Yun Hechen's legs buckled, and he fell to his knees with a thud. Then Xu Lang forced him to kowtow repeatedly, his forehead banging against the ground. It was deep in the night. A faint green glow lingered over the graves. The evening wind howled mournfully, its wailing cry like a sob, every sound filled with resentment. From within the graves, the spirits of the dead cried out, asking their husband and father why he had killed them. Outside the graves, Yun Hechen finally lost his mind completely. He took a piece of wood and carved puppets every single day. The servants sent the puppets he carved to me. Each puppet had exactly the same face. It looked like my mother, like my stepmother, and also like the late empress. I suddenly felt an urge to go to the Yun mansion and demand answers. Before leaving the palace, I suddenly coughed up a pool of fresh blood. Tears welled up in Xiao Shuangjiang's beautiful eyes, and the crimson tear mole at the corner of his eye seemed to glow even more vividly with emotion. What on earth is wrong with you? I did not know what was wrong with me either. Then, one day, someone answered the imperial edict, claiming that he could explain my strange illness. The man who arrived was a shaman doctor, 18. The shaman doctor only glanced at me once before declaring, "You have been cursed by someone close to you." Calculating the timing, he deduced that the curse must have been placed on me when I was 6 years old. "Your Highness, have you been constantly feeling cold in your hands and feet?" "Yes, then that confirms it," the shaman doctor said, stroking his grey beard. "First, the limbs grow cold, then the torso follows. Dizziness and vertigo set in next. By the time you start fainting and coughing up blood, you do not have much time left to live. This curse is called the Maiden Devouring Curse. Before casting the curse, the caster will set a taboo, a single thing that the cursed person must never do. If the cursed person dares to do that thing, the Maiden Devouring Curse will be activated automatically. Once activated, the cursed person will not live past the age of 25. He looked at me and let out a long sigh. "It is clear that the Maiden Devouring Curse on your Highness has already been triggered. How was this curse cast?" I asked him. "For 3 consecutive months, you were made to drink white rice porridge, yellow rice porridge, and black rice porridge in turn, each laced with enchanted water. On the night of the full moon after those 3 months, the caster used their own blood to complete the curse. That is how it was done. When I was 6 years old, right after the emperor announced that the female head of the Yun family would become the crown princess, Yun Hechen had indeed forced me to drink rice porridge every day for a period of time. Every single time, he would watch me drink it with his own eyes before leaving. So that was when he had cursed me. I had naively thought that the constant coldness in my limbs was simply because my clothes were too short. "Then please help me break this curse," I begged him. But the shaman doctor shook his head. "If the Maiden Devouring Curse had not yet been activated, I could have helped you. But now that it has progressed this far, this old man is powerless to do anything, so I do not have much time left. Is that it? Yes. A crash came from behind the folding screen, the sound of a teacup shattering on the floor. Xiao Shuangjiang had lost his composure. My heart plummeted into the depths of despair. Is there truly no way at all to save me? I asked, my voice hoarse with difficulty. This old man has no solution. But your highness might be able to save yourself. Find the person who cast the curse on you. Ask them what taboo they set for you. Then drain their blood until they die of blood loss. Finally, destroy the object related to the taboo with your own hands. Only then will the maiden devouring curse be lifted. The emperor had not been feeling well lately, so I did not tell him anything about the maiden devouring curse. Xiao Shuangjiang and I went together to the dungeon beneath the Yun mansion. This dungeon had once been used by the Yun family to punish disobedient relatives. Now, Yun Hachan was locked inside it. Yun Hachan was truly insane now. His hair was messy and his face was filthy. Bearing no resemblance to the elegant and refined man he had once been, he was carving a puppet with his dirty, trembling hands. When he saw me enter, his eyes suddenly focused, and he fell to his knees with a thud. Your humble servant pays homage to Her Majesty the Empress. He kowtowed. I froze in surprise. Yun Hachan, what did you just say? He kowtowed repeatedly, his voice filled with fear and reverence. Your humble servant pays homage to Her Majesty the Empress. Then he looked up, staring at me with a dazed, almost infatuated expression in his eyes. You were in love with the late Empress? I asked, the truth dawning on me. Yun Hachan did not seem to understand my words immediately. He froze for a moment, then anymore. He carefully pulled me into his arms. It was a gesture he had done 1,000 times before, but today it felt clumsy and unfamiliar, almost reverent. That night, with my face pressed against his, I slept soundly for the first time in a long while. I was woken up in the middle of the night by the dampness on my cheeks. The bright moon hung high outside the window. Xiao Shuangjiang's eyes were red, his body trembling uncontrollably. The moment our eyes met, he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, Yuan Yuan, burn me too. I am not afraid of dying anymore. I just want you to live a long and healthy life. My nose suddenly felt sore, tears pricking at the back of my eyes. Xiao Shuangjiang, I said, cupping his face in my hands and wiping away his tears with the sleeve of my robe. You are not an ordinary puppet. You are nothing like the others. Stay by my side. Please, just stay with me. How could I ever explain to the world that I had fallen in love with a puppet? Actually, I did not need to explain it to anyone. This love was not meant to be shared with the outside world. As long as he knew how I felt, that was enough. If we were destined to be separated by life and death, then let us love each other fiercely, even if it was only for a fleeting moment, like mayflies dancing in the wind. Their lives short but brilliant. A long time passed, so long that I thought Xiao Shuangjiang would never answer me. Then he leaned his cheek against my palm and nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. After that day, Xiao Shuangjiang went back to being his old self again, uninhibited and vivid, bright and fiery, just like before. When I was reading a book, he would prop his chin up in his hands and wait patiently beside me. When he grew tired of waiting, he would wrap his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on the top of my head. Am I not more interesting than this book? He would murmur, his breath tickling my ear. He was just like that little cat in the imperial garden, jealous and clingy, always wanting my attention. Then he would reach out and close my book, enveloping me completely in his embrace. Surrounding me with his presence, he would also call me to go fly kites with him when I was feeling lost in thought. Xiao Shuangjiang, I would protest with a laugh. It is the 12th lunar month. Who flies kites in the middle of winter? But then I would remember that I only had 2 or 3 winters left to live. In the end, I would always bundle up in a thick fur cloak and go with him, braving the biting north wind. The cold wind howled. The grass and trees had long since withered and turned yellow, and the world stretched out before us, desolate and cold for miles and miles. We were the only 2 people on the entire grassland. He held my hand tightly,
running with me as he threw the kite high up into the sky. The kite fearlessly rode the cold wind, its feather-light wings fluttering gracefully, soaring higher and higher into the clouds. We huddled together under the fur cloak, craning our necks to watch the kite as it danced in the wind, rising higher and higher. After a long while, Xiao Shuangjiang laced his fingers through mine and whispered, his voice soft and earnest, "Yuan, Yuan, you should soar high above the 9 heavens, just like an eagle." As he said those words, for some unknown reason, my heart suddenly skipped a beat, a sinking feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. I had a vague premonition that something terrible was about to happen, but I could not put my finger on what it was. Xiao Shuangjiang ate and slept with me as usual, but the look in his eyes when he stared at me grew more and more tender and lingering, so intense that I felt as if I could drown in it. That day, before our afternoon nap, he had been by my side, as normal as ever. But when I woke up from my nap, I searched every corner of the Yiming Palace, and there was no sign of him anywhere. Panic seized my heart, making it pound wildly in my chest. Xiao Shuangjiang was gone for an entire day. That night, I curled up alone under the quilt, shivering violently from the cold. Even though his body had never held any warmth, being by his side had always made me feel as warm as the spring breeze. The next day, news suddenly reached the palace from outside the imperial walls. Prince Rui had been assassinated and killed. When I heard the news, I felt no joy at all, only a terrible, sinking suspicion rising in my heart. I dared not think about it too deeply, afraid that my worst fears would be confirmed. I paced back and forth restlessly in the Yiming Palace, my mind in turmoil. It was late at night when Xiao Shuangjiang finally returned. The moon-white robe I had sewn for him with my own hands was stained with splatters of blood. His arm was covered in several deep knife wounds, his robe torn in several places. Xiao Shuangjiang forced a smile at me, a smile that looked more like a grimace, more heartbreaking than tears. "Yuan, Yuan," he said, his voice weak but filled with love, "I have cleared all obstacles out of your way." 20. The joy I felt at seeing Xiao Shuangjiang again was instantly shattered by those words, replaced by a cold dread that washed over me. "What have you done?" I asked him, my voice trembling with terror. Xiao Shuangjiang's tone was calm, almost serene. "I killed Prince Rui." My legs gave way beneath me, and I stumbled backward, staring at him in disbelief. My brows furrowed tightly. "You killed someone? How could you kill someone? I never even let you lay a hand on any of the Yun family members. How could you do something like this now?" I shouted at him, my voice cracking with emotion, tears streaming down my face. "Xiao Shuangjiang, don't you know that puppets who kill will be punished by heaven? Don't you know that you will be struck down by lightning and turned to ashes?" "I know," he nodded, giving me a gentle, reassuring smile as he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "But Yuan, I want to die." "Why?" I sobbed, my body shaking violently as I clung to him, my voice hoarse with grief. "You have always been so afraid of death. You have always cherished your life more than anything else." He lowered his head, his fingers gently tracing the contours of my face, his touch soft and tender. "Because you are more important to me than my own life. I was born for you, and I am willing to die for you too." Xiao Shuangjiang finally let his calm facade crumble, his voice breaking with emotion, tears streaming down his face. Yuan, you have to live. You have to live a long and happy life. For 100 years and more." The candlelight flickered and danced, casting warm shadows on our faces, softening the lines of our grief-stricken expressions. The room was completely silent, save for the sound of our quiet sobs echoing in the stillness of the night. I struggled to suppress the lump in my throat, while he fought to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. We had never once spoken the words "I love you" to each other, but we had already silently promised to stay by each other's side until the end of our days. We stared at each other in silence, our eyes filled with unspeakable love and sorrow, until the red candle finally burned down to the end, its flame flickering and dying out. In the pitch-black darkness of the room, Xiao Shuangjiang cupped my face in his hands, his touch desperate yet reverent. He lowered his head and pressed his lips gently against mine, a kiss filled with love, grief, and a final, heart-wrenching goodbye. Yuan, he whispered against my lips, his voice trembling with fear. "You know, I have always been afraid of pain." "I know," I whispered back. Tears streaming down my face, my heart breaking into a million pieces. "Yuan, Yuan, I don't want to be struck by lightning and turn to ashes. I am so scared," he sobbed, his body shaking uncontrollably in my arms. The clear blue sky outside the window suddenly turned dark and overcast. Black clouds gathering thick and fast, a damp chill filling the air, heralding an impending storm. He pressed his lips against my ear, his voice soft and warm, like a final caress. "Yuan, Yuan, burn me. Please burn me. I would rather die in the fire than be struck down by lightning." "Xiao Shuangjiang, are you out of your mind?" I wanted to yell at him, to curse him for being so stupid, so reckless. But even those words came out as a broken sob, filled with nothing but grief and love. For 10 years, we had looked after each other, stayed by each other's side through thick and thin. How could I bear to throw him into the fire? How could I bear to watch him burn to ashes before my eyes? He was still smiling at me, a smile that was gentle, determined, and utterly cruel. "Please," he begged, his voice filled with tears. "Burn me, for you." 21. On the 27th day of the 12th lunar month, I dismissed all the palace servants from the Yiming Palace, ordering them not to return until I summoned them. The palace gates were closed tightly. In the vast, empty imperial palace, only Xiao Shuangjiang and I remained. The side hall caught fire once again, 2 years ago. The fire had been set by Yunayu. 2 years later, the fire was lit by my own hands. The flames danced and flickered, casting a warm, golden glow on his face, illuminating his beautiful eyes filled with love, sorrow, and a final, quiet acceptance. He suddenly spoke, his voice light and teasing, as if we were just sharing a casual joke on a normal day. "Yuan, Yuan," he said, his lips curving into a soft, sad smile. "After I die, will you remain faithful to me? Will you never marry another?" "No." I shook my head, forcing a smile on my face, even as tears streamed down my cheeks, my voice cracking with every word. "Once the maiden-devouring curse is lifted, I will make many new puppets far more handsome than you. Then I will forget you completely. I will never think of you again." He let out a soft, genuine laugh, his smile warm and gentle, like the first light of spring. "That would be perfect." With those words, he gently pulled his hand out of mine. He took a step back, then another, walking slowly, steadily toward the raging flames. "Xiao Shuangjiang," I called out to him, my voice breaking with desperation. He did not stop, he did not look back. "Xiao Shuangjiang," I screamed his name, my knees giving way beneath me as I collapsed to the floor, tears pouring down my face like a river. I watched helplessly as the man who had been by my side for 10 years walked steadily toward his inevitable death. His figure growing smaller and smaller in the distance. Even as he grew farther away, his voice still reached me, soft and warm, filled with nothing but love. He said, "Yuan, Yuan, do not grieve for me. When it comes to life and death, I will bear it all for you." Those who are consumed by love and desire are like people holding a torch against the wind. They are bound to get burned in the end. Love is something that can never be controlled by reason, and more often than not, it begins with a beautiful promise, only to end in heartbreak and despair. He stood in the midst of the raging flames, looking back at me one last time, his eyes locked with mine, filled with a love so deep, so pure, it transcended life and death. I stood in the snow, sobbing uncontrollably, my heart shattered into a million pieces, my world collapsing around me. The wind howled wildly, like a mournful cry, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for our tragic love. The mortal world was thrown into chaos and sorrow. The fleeting years passed by in the blink of an eye. Deep love, no matter how intense, could never overcome the cruel fate that separated us. The flames painted his face one last time, burning away the final moments of our time together. I looked at him for the very last time, then he vanished into the billowing smoke and flames, turning to ashes, his existence erased from this world forever. 22. After Xiao Shuangjiang's death, the maiden-devouring curse was finally lifted. The emperor was overjoyed, declaring that my health had finally been restored. I became his only remaining heir and was officially named the crown princess. Every year, on Qingming Festival, I would always run into Shu Lang at the cemetery. After paying my respects at my mother and elder sister's graves, I would go to visit Xiao Shuangjiang's grave, which was right beside theirs. Shu Lang once asked me, his voice soft with curiosity, "Who is this person?" To me, I replied, my voice quiet, filled with unspeakable grief and love, "He is the same as Yunru is to you." Shu Lang fell silent after hearing my words, saying nothing more. He simply took some of the pastries he had brought and placed them on Xiao Shuangjiang's grave as well. A silent gesture of respect and understanding. He would sit alone in front of Yunru's grave for hours on end. Even though he was only in his 30s, his hair was already streaked with grey. A testament to the lifelong grief that consumed him, I would sit in front of Xiao Shuangjiang's tombstone until dusk fell, the sky turning a deep shade of indigo, the stars beginning to twinkle in the darkening sky. I traced his name on the cold stone over and over again, as if by doing so, I could feel his warm touch once more, as if I could reach through the barrier of life and death and touch his face again. In truth, I had lied to Xiao Shuangjiang in the end, after he died. I never made another puppet for as long as I lived. I burned all my carving tools, throwing them into the fire one by one, watching them turn to ashes, just like him. I would never again use my own blood and essence to bring another puppet to life. The impulsive passion and innocent joy of my youth had been given entirely to Xiao Shuangjiang, and with his death, they had died with him, never to be revived again. I often wondered if he had known that I had lied to him, would he have been angry? Or would he have smiled, happy in the knowledge that I would never forget him? 3 years later, the emperor's health took a turn for the worse. He was confined to his bed, day and night, his condition growing more and more critical with each passing day. He clung to life until the 12th lunar month, then finally passed away, leaving me as the sole ruler of the empire. On the 27th day of the 12th lunar month, the same day I had burned Xiao Shuangjiang to ashes, I ascended the throne and was officially crowned as the Empress of the realm. Standing atop the imperial palace, looking down at the thousands of ministers kneeling before me, swearing their allegiance, I felt a profound sense of loneliness wash over me. I was finally the most powerful person in the entire world, and also the loneliest. Xiao Shuangjiang never once appeared in my dreams, until many years later, when I was an old woman, lying on my deathbed, my life drawing to a close. In my final dream, I saw him standing on the balcony of the palace. Under the bright glow of the moon, he was wearing a plain white robe, his features as handsome and gentle as they had been on the day I first met him. He looked exactly the same as I remembered him. Forever young, forever mine, it was the frost's descent season. I set down my paintbrush and said, "Then you shall take my mother's surname, Xiao, and your given name shall be Shuangjiang." The newly carved Xiao Shuangjiang stared at me, his eyes filled with blank confusion. Then the scene blurred, and suddenly, snow was swirling all around, thick and lush. Time slipped by in the blink of an eye. 10 years had passed before I knew it, beneath the crabapple tree in the Yiming Palace. Xiao Shuangjiang stood with his hands behind his back, smiling at me. I dared not step forward, my voice cracking with sobs. "Xiao Shuangjiang, I've missed you so much." He looked at me, the tenderness in his eyes like a pool of warm spring water. Yuan, I've missed you deeply too." He took slow, steady steps toward me. This time, I would never be alone again.